221. Exploded. Snape wears women's clothes. Ridiculous. Everyone chanted together. Excellent. A bit louder and clearer pronunciation. Come on, repeat after me. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. The class shouted in unison, each syllable ringing out plainly. Very good, but simply shouting the spell won't be enough. You must learn how to make a boggart into something amusing. Longbottom, my little helper, come up and demonstrate for everyone. The wardrobe rattled again, and Neville trembled even harder than the wood did. Come on, don't be scared, come! Seamus gave Neville an encouraging pat, and at last Neville nervously stepped forward. Excellent. Longbottom, tell me, what frightens you most? Neville's upper lip quivered, but no sound came. Lupin smiled gently. Sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat it? Professor Snape, Neville blurted. The class erupted in laughter. Even Lupin grinned. Severus, yes, very intimidating when he shows up in that mood. If I'm not mistaken, you live with your grandmother, don't you? Yes, I'm very afraid of my grandmother too, but I don't want the boggart to turn into her. No, it won't, Lupin said. I want you to imagine your grandmother's everyday clothes. The more detailed, the better. She carries a red handbag, and she wears a green. No need to say it out loud. If you can picture it, we'll see it. When I open the wardrobe, I want you to do this. After you cast Ridiculous, concentrate and imagine Professor Snape wearing your grandmother's clothes. The students roared with laughter. Neville stared at Lupin, astonished. Can you do it, Longbottom? Neville nodded shakily. Very good. Everyone, pay attention. If Longbottom succeeds, the boggart will move on to the next person in the room, one at a time. Now, take a moment to think about what frightens you most, and imagine a funny form for the boggart to take. The laughter died down and the classroom fell silent. Robin sat thinking about what he feared most. His 3 heart palpitations all came back to the abyss. How could he make the abyss amusing? After a few minutes, Lupin asked, Is everyone ready? Everyone rolled up their sleeves and gripped their wands. Very good. Everyone step back except Longbottom. After Longbottom is finished, I'll call you up one by one. Neville's legs shook like jelly, but he raised his wand at the wardrobe. Longbottom, I'll count to 3, then you act. Lupin pointed his wand at the doorknob. 3, 2, 1. A spark leaped from the tip of his wand and struck the brass knob. The wardrobe door sprang open. Professor Snape, in his black robes, stormed out, eyes cold and dangerous, and advanced on Neville. Neville's lips trembled. Snape reached inside his robes as if to pull out his wand. Lupin stepped behind Neville and put a steadying hand on his shoulder. Think, Longbottom, quickly. You can do it. The mock Snape drew his wand and pointed it at Neville's forehead. Neville shrieked. Ridiculous! There was a sharp crack, like a whip against stone. The hateful Snape staggered as his appearance warped. In moments he wore a dark green frilly dress, a fox fur stole, and a tall hat topped with a stuffed vulture riddled with maggot holes. He clutched a red handbag over his front, as if terrified of being seen. The class exploded into laughter. Lupin waved them down with a grin. Lestrange, go! Robin stepped forward at the summons. The ridiculous Snape flailed his hat and lunged, then with a sharp pop he vanished. In his place hung a dark, circular void, an abyss, sucking the air around it. Loneliness, confusion, dread, and panic washed over Robin like a wave. His heart hammered, his head throbbed, his chest tightened. For a moment he wanted to flee, but he forced himself to focus, picturing increasingly silly shapes. At last he shouted, Ridiculous! With a bright pop, the abyss turned from black to cheerful yellow. 2 enormous, crossed eyes like wagon wheels sprouted on its top. Below, an upside-down pine-cone mouth grinned with white teeth and a pink tongue, rosy cheeks on either side. 5 rainbow petals circled it like the face of a dazed sunflower sprite. The room erupted in laughter again. Robin joined in. Lupin clapped. Excellent. Focus your mind, face your fear, and resist. Very well done. Everyone should learn from Lestrange. Back in line. Next, Weasley. Robin fell back into the crowd, and Ron Weasley stepped forward. The sunflower popped into a huge, furry acromantula the size of a small elephant, claws waving. Ridiculous, Ron yelled, eyes wide. Pop, the spider's legs disappeared and it rolled helplessly in place. Brown, Lupin called. Lavender Brown rushed forward, brushing past Ron. Pop, the legless spider vanished and rematerialized as a large python with a tortoiseshell pattern, hissing and flicking its tongue at her. Ridiculous, Lavender cried. Pop! The python turned into a clown-shaped roly-poly toy with a ridiculous painted face that made Lavender giggle. Patil! Lupin called next. Parvati Patil stepped up. Pop! The clown became a lumbering mummy, dragging bloody bandages. Ridiculous! Parvati cried. Pop! The bandages unspooled, tripping the mummy. Its head rolled off and tumbled to the side. Finnegan! Came the next shout. Seamus hurried forward. Pop! The mummy melted into a woman in red, clutching her throat and letting out an ear-piercing wail. Ridiculous! Seamus shouted. Pop! The woman transformed into a small mouse, chasing its own tail. Next! Lupin said brightly. Harry Potter stepped forward eagerly. Pop! The mouse melted into a hooded, chilling Dementor. It glided menacingly toward Harry, robes flapping. Harry barely had time to reach for his wand before Lupin lunged between him and the creature. Watch me! With a quick flick, there was a pop. The Dementor became a silvery white sphere floating in midair. Fear flickered across Lupin's face for a flash, but he forced himself to grin and intoned lazily, Ridiculous! Pop! The silver sphere burst into a squeaky balloon that bounced erratically through the crowd. It deflated, bobbled in a wide arc, and finally darted back into the wardrobe. Lupin sealed the door with a locking charm. That's enough for today. Everyone did wonderfully. He smiled at them all. After class, reread the chapter on boggarts and write an essay on effective strategies for defeating a boggart. Hand it in to my office before class next week. Everyone packed up their things and left the staff room, chattering excitedly about what had just happened. I still don't get why Professor Lupin's worst fear was a crystal ball, Ron muttered. And why didn't he let me face the boggart alone? Harry asked, puzzled. Robin thought to himself that it hadn't been a crystal ball at all. It had been the full moon. And as for throwing himself in front of Harry, that had been nothing more than instinct. At least you stood in front of it, Ron complained. What about me? I didn't even get a chance. If you'd gone up to it, what would it have turned into? A test paper with a 0, or Professor Snape telling you you've got no magical talent? Hermione snapped, shooting Ron a glare that shut him up. After that lesson, Lupin's reputation soared. His fresh, engaging mix of theory and practical work made Defense Against the Dark Arts the most popular elective within weeks. Snape, for his part, was in an especially foul mood ever since the boggart had chosen him as its form, and Neville had dressed him in a grandmother's outfit. Anyone who so much as mentioned Lupin near Snape was met with a cold look and an inventive deduction of house points. Hagrid's Care of Magical Creatures class, after he assigned the year's curriculum as Raising Flobberworms, had climbed to the top of the most boring class list. Still, Hagrid granted Robin and a few others small privileges, a spare key to Buckbeak's shed, for instance, so they could visit the winged beast in the game reserve during free hours, but not at night. One evening, Robin ignored Hagrid's warning and took Hermione out on Buckbeak for a reckless night ride through the woods. When they reached an open glade, Hermione flung her arms wide and shouted with delight. Her hair streamed behind her and brushed Robin's face, making his nose tingle. In the thickets, she would twist in the saddle and bury herself against him, her nails digging into his ribs until he winced. After a while, Buckbeak leapt a thick hedge and landed in a clearing. Robin slid down, took Hermione's waist in his hands, and lifted her off with a sweep. He patted Buckbeak's rump. The hippogriff snorted, turned, and galloped back into the trees. "Why bring me out here?" Hermione asked. Moonlight silvered her features. She looked impossibly beautiful. "To see purple fireworks," she said. The previous Monday, before Kenzio left for Mount Beagle, he had asked Dapang to bring some custom-made fireworks. Robin pulled a 16-tube launcher from his private mine space, round and as thick as a wellhead, set it in the center of the clearing, drew his wand, and lit the fuse. Sizzle, whoosh, boom. 16 explosions sent more than 100 glowing purple jellyfish into the air. Their translucent bells pulsed like mushrooms. Long, ribbon-like tentacles floated and swayed as if tied to the branches. Wherever they drifted, they left tiny pinpricks of light, lumos-like sparks that winked and then turned into purple bellflowers. The spectacle was so strange and lovely that none of them could look away. "This is the best birthday I've ever had," Hermione breathed, throwing herself into Robin's arms. He hugged her back, his thumb resting unconsciously against her collarbone. The curve was neat and delicate. She shivered, and her breath quickened when he touched it. She looked up at him with misty eyes. Under the moon, he was handsome and sure, she radiant and soft. With the dreamlike jellyfish drifting around them, it would have been a miracle if nothing happened. Robin's throat worked as he leaned in. Hermione clenched her fists and closed her eyes. A sudden creak of a breaking twig made them both freeze. Robin whipped his head around to see Buckbeak looking guilty, Harry grinning awkwardly, and Ron with his mouth hanging open wide enough to fit an orange. Sneaking out in the middle of the night just to see, hiss, jellyfish fireworks? Ron grumbled, staring at the glowing creatures. How'd you two get out here? Hermione let go of Robin, her expression awkward. Harry dropped off Buckbeak and reached toward a drifting tentacle as he explained. I woke up in the night and noticed Robin wasn't in the dormitory. I peeked out the window and saw a light on at the game reserve shed. Since today's September 19th, it's Hermione's birthday, I thought you might be out with Buckbeak. I guessed you were riding Buckbeak and taking Hermione out, Ron finished. So I went and woke Ron, and we snuck out and found Buckbeak at the edge of the forest. But you two only have one invisibility bead between you. How did you avoid Filch and the prefects? Hermione produced a small box and opened it to reveal a purple marble. Ta-da! My birthday present, an invisibility bead. No time limit, no use limit. She beamed. Robin, remember my birthday is March 1st. Ron made an envious noise. Harry reached into his pocket and handed Hermione a long rectangular box. You've been busy all day, and I never had the right moment. It's a quick quotes quill. I spent ages choosing it. That's perfect. I was thinking of getting a new one. Hermione tore off the wrapping and found a gleaming, gracefully curved quill inside. On the lid was a gold inscription. Suck the nib into your mouth for a moment, and the quill will enter work mode, perching on the paper and writing in a bold, expansive hand. Robin thought, dazzling, expansive, just flashy and not very practical. Rita Skeeter used exactly that sort of quill to write her sensational, often outright false reports. Hermione had once caught Rita, confined her to a jar, and only released her at the end of term. No problem, Hermione said aloud, closing the box and tucking it into her enchanted bag. Ron stepped forward with another present, a stout 3-layer canvas backpack. Huge capacity, he said proudly. 30-something books, no problem. Hermione yanked at the straps to test them. Thanks. As the jellyfish and bellflowers dimmed, the 4 students and 1 hippogriff made for the edge of the forest. Buckbeak was secured. Harry and Ron slipped under the invisibility cloak, and Robin and Hermione popped the beads into their mouths. Quietly, they slipped back to the castle and into their dormitories. September passed in a blink. By early October, Captain Wood's competitive spirit had flared again. Training hours increased from 3 evenings a week to 4, plus all-day Saturday, come rain or shine. And before each practice, Wood held his ritual meeting, a rousing pep talk to get everyone in the mood. 223, Grindylow, gold-framed black film. At first, everyone listened to Wood with burning enthusiasm, itching to mount their brooms and take on Slytherin. By the middle of his speech, most of them let it slip in one ear and out the other, offering only a few half-hearted comments. By the end, they were yawning and dozing off. During meetings, Wood would clap loudly at anyone he caught with their eyes closed, then raise his voice and keep going. Robin worried Wood's throat would give out before the match even began. As October wound down, a new notice appeared on the notice board. 3rd years with a signed permission slip could visit Hogsmeade on Halloween Eve. In the whole year, only Robin's and Harry's slips were unsigned. After Transfiguration, everyone filed up to hand in their forms. The 2 of them waited until most of their classmates had gone before they approached the podium together. If your permission slip isn't signed, you may not go to the village. That's the rule, Professor McGonagall said, stern, as she looked at their slips. Professor, if you signed it, I could, Robin began. I cannot sign it. The rules are explicit. The signature must be from a parent or guardian. I am neither. She closed her mouth. Harry's look fell. I have no parents, no guardian, Harry said quietly. You could sign for me. McGonagall placed a hand on Robin's shoulder, drew him to the side, and in a low voice said, Lestrange, you can go to Hogsmeade next year. I want you to do something else this time. Look after Harry. Do you understand me? Robin nodded, thinking it over. On Halloween Eve, they stood by the castle gate and watched the carriages bearing students away toward Hogsmeade. Harry looked small and lonely, and Robin tried to cheer him. Don't be discouraged. You've still got me. You've been to Hogsmeade plenty of times, haven't you? Harry said. There'll be other chances. It's only for a year. Everyone's gone. Let's head back. All right. They trudged into the entrance hall. On the third-floor landing, they ran into Lupin coming the other. Why aren't you two going to Hogsmeade? He asked. Robin shrugged. Our permission slips aren't signed. Lupin gave a sympathetic nod. I thought so. Don't be put out. There'll be other times. Come, I'll show you something interesting. I've just acquired a Grindylow. They followed him to his office. It was neat and well lit. In one corner stood a tall red cover, beside it, a large tank. Inside the tank, a green creature pressed its face to the glass, a fish-like head atop a vaguely human torso, tapering into writhing tentacles below. Horns jutted from its head, and it put on grotesque, eerie faces while it waved long, thin fingers. Robin leaned closer. Clang! The horns smashed against the glass. The creature bared its teeth as if it wanted to leap out. Harry recoiled and grabbed Robin's sleeve. That's all right, Lupin said calmly. The tank's charmed. It can't get out. Grindylows are water-dwelling creatures, he added. They feed on fish and occasionally attack wizards, or muggles. Their grips are strong, though their claws are fairly brittle. If you get caught by a Grindylow while crossing a lake, you only need to. Lupin reached for a wooden bookmark on his desk, walked to the tank, and snapped it in two. The Grindylow froze mid-gesture, then darted into the clumps of water plants and hid, as if fleeing for its life. He took the hint, Lupin said with a small laugh. Right, since you two can't go browsing in Hogsmeade, you can browse my collection instead. He tapped his wand against the red cover. It shook and climbed away to reveal a four-tiered rotating display, patched together from old wheels. The rack looked ramshackle, but the objects on it were rare and strange. Deep purple fangs, a strand of hair that seemed to glow, perfumed stones, bizarre specimens preserved in jars, necklaces crusted in oyster shell. Both boys were entranced. When I travel, I collect things, Lupin said. I've gathered quite a few. Pick one. Harry wandered and chose a silver whistle engraved with a phoenix. He blew it. The sound soared clear and otherworldly, like a phoenix's cry, refreshing and almost purifying. Good choice, said Lupin. That's a spirit-cleansing whistle. It calms the mind and sharpens thought. Lestrange, which do you want? Robin pointed to a fist-sized lump that looked like crystallized sea salt. As he'd scanned the rack earlier, it had made his chest tighten. Danger and opportunity, he thought. Lupin used tongs to lift the lump and place it on an iron tray. Years ago, while I was crossing the Strait of Gibraltar, I was attacked by a Kronos water monster. After a struggle, it left this behind and sank back into the depths. It looked like a crystallized salt. Here. Robin held the tray, murmured a clearing charm, and the rough encrustation peeled away to reveal a pendant. A thin copper chain hung from it. The pendant was a walnut-sized gold frame holding a piece of black material. It had a smooth surface but did not reflect a human face, nor did it shine in light. It absorbed it. Thank you, Robin said, setting the tray back. Lupin's eyes gleamed. If you want to thank me properly, help me solve a puzzle. In our first defense class, when the boggart faced you, it became a giant abyss. I understand that represents loneliness, emptiness, fear, but what did it turn into after you cast ridiculous? Robin smiled. I picked up some joke books at a Muggle bookstore during the holidays. They had all sorts of funny human expressions. I combined those with images of flowers and made it into a sunflower with a human face. Lupin laughed. Muggle ingenuity is far more resourceful than many wizards admit. Professor, I have a question too, Harry said. Why did you step in front of me instead of letting me face the boggart alone? Lupin rubbed the bridge of his nose, a little embarrassed. I thought, wrongly, that the boggart might take the form of Lord Voldemort. I didn't want to frighten everyone else into sleepless nights on the very first lesson. Harry went still for a moment. He hadn't expected that reply. Few people said Voldemort's name freely. I thought of him too, Harry said at last. But then I remembered how I had run him off with my friends, and I thought of the Dementor on the train. Very wise, Lupin said, warm with approval. That shows what you truly feared was fear itself, and I am surprised you thought I doubted you could handle a boggart." A bright, genuine smile bloomed on Harry's thin face. 2 of 24. Wolfsbane Potion, One-Eyed Look. "Professor, you're the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Surely you know something that can ward off Dementors?" Robin asked. "There is indeed a spell," Lupin said. "The Patronus Charm. It's an advanced enchantment, far beyond owl level. A Patronus forms a kind of shield between a witch or wizard and a Dementor. The gesture is to draw a circle counterclockwise, and the incantation is Expecto Patronum. But the words and the movement alone won't do it. You also need a very strong, very happy memory, something pure and beautiful." "Professor, can you teach us how to cast it?" Harry asked eagerly. "I'm sorry, it's not on the curriculum," Lupin replied. He looked at Harry's disappointed face and added gently, "At least not this year. We'll see next year. If I'm still in good health, I'll teach you. The Patronus Charm is very demanding." "Good health, Professor. What's wrong with you?" A knock on the office door cut him off. "Come in," Lupin called. The door creaked open, and Severus Snape strode in, carrying a goblet of steaming, blue-purple potion. He stopped when he saw Robin and Harry, narrowing his eyes in obvious displeasure. "Ah, Severus, you've been bothered again," Lupin said as if apologizing. "I was showing Harry and Lestrange the Grindylows in my little collection." Snape glanced coldly at the four-tiered display shelf. "With all due respect, that hardly qualifies as a collection." He set the goblet on Lupin's desk. "You should drink this immediately." "How thoughtful. Thank you," Lupin replied. "I brewed 2 large cauldrons just in case you didn't have enough," Snape added, with an expression that made it clear he hoped it would be awkwardly necessary. "That's generous of you. I might need another cup tomorrow," Lupin said, and Snape snorted and swept out of the office in his robes. Robin watched the goblet. The liquid steamed a blue-purple swirl, Wolfsbane Potion. He remembered that in the books, if a werewolf takes a certain amount of wolfsbane in the week before the full moon, he can keep his human mind when he transforms. "Professor, why are you taking medicine?" Harry asked, concerned. Lupin picked up the goblet, sniffed, and winced so that his face crinkled. "My health has never been particularly robust, and unfortunately, this is the only potion that helps." "I am not much of a potions brewer," he went on, "and this potion is very complex to brew. I'm lucky that Severus agreed to help. Very few witches or wizards can brew wolfsbane properly, and it's extraordinarily expensive. Even if I emptied my savings, I couldn't buy half a bottle." Robin's eyes swept over Lupin's patched robes. Lupin was as poverty-struck as he looked, patched and humble. Like Dobby, he faced discrimination, struggled to find work, and scraped by from day to day. Still, he never used magic for selfish gain. Harry, remembering Snape's obvious dislike for Lupin, couldn't help asking, "Professor, are you sure the potion's safe? Snape's not exactly subtle about wanting the defense job. He might." Lupin chuckled softly, tipped his head back, and drained the goblet in one, smacking his lips at the awful taste. "It tastes terrible, but if you sweeten it, it won't work. All right, Harry, Lestrange, I have to grade the 4 methods to subdue a Kappa homework now. See you at dinner." He set aside another thick stack of homework from a drawer, produced a quill, and began to mark. A Kappa, for those who needed reminding, was a water-dwelling creature that resembled a scaly monkey with webbed hands and a hollow on top of its head filled with water. If the water in that hollow was spilled, the Kappa would lose its strength. Seeing Lupin settle to work, Robin pulled Harry out of the office, and they left for the dormitory. That evening, just before the feast, Hermione and Ron came bustling into the 8th-floor common room, cheeks flushed from the cold and beaming. A cascade of colorful sweets landed on the small table in front of Robin. First stop was the owl post. There were almost 300 owls, big ones and little ones, some as large as eagles, others tiny as sparrows. Each had a colored ring on its leg with a code, Hermione chattered, stuffing her favorite sweets into Robin's hands. Then zonkos, practically every prank device you can imagine. We even saw Fred and George buying winged beetles. Honeydukes had a new creamy fudge. And finally, the 3 broomsticks, hot chocolate that warms you through, she added, eyes shining. "Harry, you stayed in the castle all day, finished your charms homework, right? Let me copy it," Ron said, happily chewing a frog-shaped gummy. I haven't written a single word. I finished it yesterday, Robin said. Ron's face fell, then brightened into a pleading grin. But I'm not letting you copy it anyway. Harry told them about the visit to Lupin's office. A personal collection? How cool. I wish I'd been there, Ron said with envy. Hermione jumped in at the mention of the Patronus. He told us the gesture, the incantation, and the memory part. That's brilliant. We can practice in private. But isn't it odd that Snape brewed a potion for Lupin? Harry said. Lupin's ill, yet he still has the post. Why would Snape help? It is strange, Hermione mused. Snape always looks at Lupin like he'd like to see him fail. Why would he be kind? Robin glanced at the clock on the common room wall. Perhaps Dumbledore ordered it, he suggested. Dinner starts in 10 minutes. Let's go. Hermione began packing the sweets into her enchanted bag. As the four of them moved toward the portrait hole, the common room door creaked open, and Fred and George bounded in. George, your new Halloween costume you're a Cyclops? Fred laughed. George's right eye was covered with a thick round patch, strapped diagonally above and below and tied at the back of his head. A Cyclops, George howled with laughter. Why didn't we think of that sooner? I'm asking Madame Pomfrey to make one for me tomorrow. Harry, puzzled, asked, What happened to your eye? Nothing, just a bit of bug juice got in it, George said casually, winking with his good eye. 225. Hornless rhino, fat lady escapes, doxies. I told you, those things are dangerous. Wherever they crawl, they leave a toxin that stings the skin and the blood vessels. No amount of washing gets it off. Imagine if the juice had splashed in your eyes, Hermione exclaimed. It hurt so much I howled, George went on. We'd put 20 doxies in the grass, lit some homemade fireworks, and we're going to make a show with doxy juice. But I got tangled in mountain tiger vines. My robes have scorch holes all down one side, and after Madame Pomfrey's ointment, my eyes still hurt. She made me wear an eye patch so the sun, wind, and rain don't get at them for a fortnight, George finished. Has Wood been told? Harry asked. With George like that, he'd probably be out of next Saturday's Quidditch match. Don't worry, we still have Ron. The two of them laughed and walked toward the portrait hole. They're so carefree, Ron said under his breath. If Mrs. Weasley knew, she'd broom them both up the stairwell. Ron's voice sounded grumpy, but his eyes were uneasy. Come on, if we don't leave now, we'll be late, Hermione urged. The four of them climbed through the portrait hole and joined the throng in the great hall. The enchanted ceiling was dark, lightning flashing occasionally, and real bats wheeled and chattered above. Little black shapes skimmed among the floating candles over the long tables, and pumpkin lanterns of every size lined the room. After Dumbledore's short welcome, Hermione handed Ron his apple juice, forked away his sausage, and they settled down to eat. During the meal, Ron kept glancing at the staff table. He watched Madame Pomfrey cutting her macaroni into impossibly thin strips with knife and fork, as if performing a delicate operation. He saw Lupin and Flitwick chatting comfortably, apparently unconcerned by the approaching full moon. And he noticed Snape's eyes sliding repeatedly to Lupin, hatred and contempt flickering across his face. When everyone had eaten, Dumbledore stood and waved. Dozens of ghosts drifted out of the walls and from under the benches, leaning forward and floating up to perform. The last piece starred nearly headless Nick, who enlisted other ghosts to reenact his beheading, much to the audience's amusement. After the feast, the four of them dawdled in the hall, rather than crowd the staircases. When most people had gone, they climbed the stone stairs toward the common room. At the fifth-floor landing, Ron suddenly stopped. He'd heard a faint, sharp sobbing coming from the landscape painting of a herd of hornless rhinos set into the wall beside him. "Fat lady, is that you?" Ron called uncertainly. The fat lady peered out from behind one of the rhinos. Her hair was a mess, her dress smeared with grass, and she looked terrified, as if she had just been through something dreadful. "The feast's over, and everyone's going back to bed. Who's going to open the door for us now?" she said, then began to complain. "I don't care who it is. I'm not doing this anymore. It was awful. Someone cut my painting and shouted at me. I ran for my life. A madman, a complete madman." "Who was it?" Hermione asked, frowning. "He has demon's eyes, a dark soul, just like his name, Sirius Black," the fat lady whispered. "He came into the castle to kill. I wouldn't let him in, so he took it out on me. I'm not going back to the 8th floor until he's caught. She shrank back behind the rhino and fell silent. Harry's eyelids fluttered. Hermione covered her mouth, too startled to speak. Ron glanced at his chest. Scabbers was safely in his pocket in the dormitory, and realized the intruder's aim must have been Peter Pettigrew. "Excuse me, could you move aside so I can get past? The fat lady's missing, and everyone's crowded on the 8th floor. I need to find the headmaster," a voice called from the stairwell. Percy, pushing past, announced from halfway down the steps, "The fat lady's in that painting." Ron patted the rhino painting, but the fat lady refused to peek out again. "Don't wander off," Hermione muttered. "When Dumbledore arrives, he'll find a way to get the fat lady back." Percy had already clattered down to the 4th floor. "Come on, let's go up," Hermione said, and the four hurried to the 8th floor portrait hole, forcing their way through the press of students. The portrait guarding the Gryffindor entrance had been slashed beyond recognition. Canvas fragments lay scattered on the floor. A noisy crowd clustered around, whispering and pointing. Malfoy, Mrs. Norris, Peeves, and 100 others were being named as suspects. Moments later, Dumbledore appeared, followed by Filch, Snape, McGonagall, and Percy. The throng parted as they approached. Dumbledore strode to the ruined portrait, cast a quick appraisal, and then said to Filch in a grave voice, "Argus, gather the ghosts. Search every painting in the castle until you find the fat lady." "There's no need to search," Percy blurted. "She's in that hornless rhino painting on the 5th floor. She says Sirius Black tore her canvas." A collective gasp rippled through the students. Percy looked smug. McGonagall's mouth tightened. Filch peered nervously down the stairwell. Snape's lip curled as if he had long expected Black's return. "Argus, put the castle on lockdown," Dumbledore ordered. "Minerva, Severus, tell the students of each house to return to the Great Hall." Snape swept off down the stairs, sneering. McGonagall instructed Percy to marshal the Gryffindors to the hall, then went off to fetch Flitwick and Sprout. 10 minutes later, the Great Hall was full again. The students from Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin looked puzzled until the Gryffindors explained. An escaped murderer had broken into the castle. Their faces turned pale. McGonagall and Flitwick descended to the hall and, waving their wands, began closing doors throughout the school, leaving only a single small exit. McGonagall stepped forward and spoke in a strict voice. "There is an emergency," she announced. "The castle must be searched. For your own safety, you will have to spend the night in the Great Hall. Prefects will take turns guarding the entrance," she continued. "The head boys and girls will patrol. If any unusual situation is discovered, send a ghost to report immediately." With a gentle flick of her wand, the tables and benches flew to the walls and stood upright. Another wave produced several hundred soft, deep purple sleeping bags neatly arranged on the floor. "Everyone pick a sleeping bag and get in. In 10 minutes, the Great Hall lights will go out." After she finished speaking, Professor Flitwick slipped out through the small door. Percy gathered the prefects and assigned them to guard the entrances and patrol the hall. Robin and the others grabbed 4 sleeping bags, dragged them into a corner, and settled down, propping their heads up to whisper. "Do you think Sirius is still in the castle?" Hermione asked in a thin voice. "He's not," Robin replied. "If he could slip into the castle without anyone noticing, he could just as easily slip out." "But the headmaster and the professors think he's still here. They're searching the castle thoroughly, aren't they?" Ron said. "It was Halloween Eve. Everyone was at the feast. No one was in the tower. What was he doing on the 8th floor?" Harry asked, puzzled. "Maybe he'd been wandering so long he lost track of the date," Ron said, still rattled. "Otherwise, he'd have burst into the Great Hall and made a scene." "There's another possibility," Hermione said. "There's something he wanted up in the tower." "The invisibility cloak," Robin said. "Besides that, what else would he be after? Do you think he apparated in?" "No," Robin added. "Flitwick said the castle and its grounds are protected by spells. You can't apparate here unless you're an elf." Now that he thought about it, Dobby appearing with a snap had been unsettling. "Maybe he turned into a student and just walked in," Ron guessed. "No," Hermione said. "Dumbledore told us at the start of term that Dementors will be stationed at all the school entrances. No disguise or trick can fool them." "What about secret passages?" Harry asked. Filch watches them all, Ron said hopelessly. He'd hoped Fred and George might know a passage Filch didn't, but after asking them for 2 months, he'd learned otherwise. Robin thought of the few castle-to-village passages even Filch didn't know about, but kept that to himself. Percy was doing his rounds and suddenly appeared near the corner with a thunderous expression. "Those sleeping bags aren't for chatting," he snapped. Pfft! All the candles in the great hall extinguished, and ghostly pale lights drifted above, hovering and patrolling like faint moons. Hermione closed her eyes. Harry and Ron buried themselves in their sleeping bags. Robin lay flat, hands under his head, and stared up at the enchanted ceiling, which reflected the night sky. There were only a few stars. The moon was a little shy of being full. Suddenly, Percy's long face obscured the whole sky. "Sleep," he barked. Robin glanced at the gleaming prefect badge and shut his eyes. He could hear Percy's footsteps fade away and the soft, irregular breathing of Hufflepuffs nearby. Many people pretended to sleep, but a few hours later, only a handful remained awake. At 2 in the morning, Robin heard steady, soft footsteps approach. Dumbledore. To ensure the students' safety, a teacher walked the Great Hall every hour. The small door creaked open again. Snape followed with long, measured strides. "Sir?" His voice was cold and low. "How is it?" Dumbledore asked. "Black isn't here. We've searched the upper levels, the lower levels, the astronomy tower, the owlery, everywhere." "I expected as much," Dumbledore said. "He would not linger in the castle." "He's extraordinary," Snape said, "to break into the school alone and leave no trace." "Indeed." "How do we suppose he got in?" Snape asked. "Difficult to say," Dumbledore murmured. "I've considered many possibilities. None of them fully explain it." "Do you remember our conversation at the start of term? It seems unlikely Sirius could have broken in without inside help," Snape said, his tone dark. "Severus, I do not think any professor would aid him in such a thing," Dumbledore replied. "The castle is safe. Early tomorrow, send the students back to their houses. As for the Dementors," he hardened his voice, "as long as I am headmaster, they shall not cross the school threshold. Those creatures have no humanity." Dumbledore rarely spoke with such coldness. His dislike of Dementors was plain. When he left the hall, Snape hesitated, then followed him out. In the corner, 4 pairs of eyes opened briefly and then shut again as whispers buzzed like mosquitoes. "Who do you think the insider is?" Ron muttered. "You believe Snape's theory?" Hermione shot back. "I believe Dumbledore. If he says there's no insider, then there isn't." "Percy's coming. Close your eyes," Robin warned. By the time Percy reached the corner, the 4 had their eyes closed, but he had already seen them not sleeping when he was several meters away. "If you keep chatting instead of sleeping, 20 house points from each of you," he warned, and walked off. They didn't open their eyes again that night. Over the next few days, the whole school buzzed with one question. How did Sirius Black get into the castle? In herbology, Hannah Abbott insisted Sirius could have transformed into a flowering bush and been hauled in through the compost heap. No one believed her except Neville, who nodded with wide-eyed admiration. Hannah grew so excited she didn't notice a venomous tentacula clambering onto her shoulder until Professor Sprout intervened and pulled it away. After the fat lady's portrait was repaired, she refused to return to the 8th floor post until Black was caught. Other portraits were terrified by what had happened and would not take the post either, except the ostentatious, self-styled, brave Sir Cadogan. His portrait was installed over the Gryffindor entrance. Cadogan spent half his time chasing a tiny gray pony through the painted corridors and bursting into other portraits to issue challenges. The other half he spent at the entrance, calling out complex, convoluted, and utterly ridiculous passwords, and insisting they be changed at least 3 times a day. The constant password changes frustrated everyone, especially Neville, who never remembered them. After waiting in the 8th floor corridor for half an hour on several occasions until a fellow Gryffindor appeared and gave him the password, Neville took Seamus's advice and started writing the daily passwords in a palm-sized notebook. The first full Saturday after Halloween was supposed to be Gryffindor versus Slytherin Quidditch Day, but the downpour that had started the night of the fat lady's portrait incident hadn't let up, and it put a damp, miserable pall over everything. After training that morning, Wood had a piece of bad news for the team. worse than George's eye injury, keeping him out of the match. The opponents for Saturday had been changed. Instead of Slytherin, they would be facing Hufflepuff. Malfoy's arm was still giving him agonizing pain. For over 2 months, Wood's drills had been built around Slytherin's reckless style. Hufflepuff, meanwhile, had a new captain and a suddenly strong lineup. All anyone knew was that the captain was very handsome. Their tactics, broom quality, and special skills were unknown. The whole team felt unsettled. Malfoy's arm healed ages ago, someone muttered. In potions the first week back, he drank some shrinking potion by accident, another said. When he screamed for help, his arm was flailing like a windshield wiper. Slytherin refused to play, Robin heard Wood grumble. They say their reckless style would be a disadvantage in this storm. Very convenient. I get it, Robin said, but Madame Pomfrey can't do anything about it, so we can't prove he's faking. Exactly. Tomorrow we have to be on our toes the whole time. No slacking for a second. They left the stadium heavy-hearted. The rain thickened through the morning, and by afternoon, the sky outside the windows was as dark as night. Under the steady drum of water, Robin and a few others, textbooks clutched under their arms, walked the dim corridors to Defense Against the Dark Arts and took seats in a row. Students filtered in, chattering nervously about what little monster Lupin might bring today. When the bell rang, it wasn't Lupin who came down the stairs, but Snape, black robes billowing. Hermione raised her hand before anyone could speak. "Where is Professor Lupin?" she asked. "He's taken ill," Snape said coolly. "Not in any mortal danger, if that's what you're worried about." "What's wrong with him?" someone asked. Snape clicked his tongue. "Save the sympathy. We just covered Kappas and Grindylows, and we will now proceed to Hinkypunks." "Turn to page 394, he said without ceremony. Robin found the page. A large full moon graphic stared back, and in the center a wolfish creature was drawn mid-howl. Across the top in bold red letters, werewolf. Robin's mind slid into the text, remembering how werewolves had been described in the original work. They weren't just folklore. Lycanthropy was a magical disease. It spread when saliva from a werewolf in wolf form entered another person's bloodstream through a bite. Lycanthropy was incurable. The best sufferers had was the wolfsbane potion, which lessened the agony of transformation and let them retain human sanity when the moon was full. Without it, a werewolf, on the full moon, would change into a more vicious, stronger wolf form that might stand upright and attack anything nearby. Sometimes they even killed those closest to them. When a werewolf reverted to human, they could remember everything that had happened while they were transformed. The wolfsbane potion was costly, and most werewolves were poor. Some chose suicide rather than endure the monthly horror. Not everyone bitten became a werewolf. 2 conditions had to be met. The attacker had to be in wolf form, and the attacker's saliva had to contact the bitten person's blood. A scratch alone left a permanent scar, but didn't infect. Bites on nights that weren't full moons wouldn't cause full transformation, though victims could develop werewolf tendencies, an appetite for raw, bloody meat, for instance. Silver dust mixed with dittany could seal fresh werewolf wounds and stop fatal bleeding, but it couldn't prevent the disease from taking hold. And ways to kill a werewolf were grimly listed in the margins. A heavy book thudded onto a desk and snapped Robin back to the classroom. Snape's dark eyes swept the students. "Everyone's on the page, I presume?" he asked. "Werewolves," Ron blurted. "We haven't even covered Hinkypunks yet," Parvati whispered. "Turn to page 79 and teach us about Hinkypunks," Siemis suggested. "Silence. I didn't ask for comments," Snape said coldly, and a satisfied curl touched his mouth. "All right, who can tell me the difference between an animagus and a werewolf?" Hermione shot her hand up so fast it almost tore the air, but Snape ignored her. "No one? How disappointing," he sneered. "Professor Lupin didn't explain the difference to you?" "I will," Hermione began, but Snape cut her off. "Miss Granger, spouting off without being called upon again. Can you not control your tongue, or do you take special pleasure in being an insufferable know-it-all? 10 points from Gryffindor." "He had a point, though," Ron muttered. Hermione shot him a look, then quietly put away her stationery. For the rest of the lesson, she didn't raise her hand. She wasn't upset at the insult so much as she didn't want Gryffindor losing points because of her. Snape proceeded to pick apart the previous lesson's homework with his usual relish for finding faults. Finally, the class dragged to a close and the corridor bell rang. But Snape didn't let them go. To ensure this sinks in, I want an essay on identifying and killing werewolves. 2 rolled parchments on my desk Monday morning, he said with a sneer. The room erupted. 2 rolls of parchment meant no Sunday fun. Professor, there's a Quidditch match tomorrow, couldn't we? Someone began. Potter, be particularly careful in tomorrow's match, Snape said, turning his cold glare. And even if you fall from your broom and break an arm or a leg, you will still hand in the assignment. Class dismissed. 2 and 28, Badger College grass, Cedric. After class, the 4 of them followed the crowd toward the stone steps, listening to the whispers about Snape. Some said he was acting out of spite, that Lupin's Boggart lessons had embarrassed him, and that he resented losing the defense against the dark arts post. Robin stared at the rain lashing against the windows, thinking about how to handle tomorrow's match. A thunderstorm swept across Hogwarts on Saturday. Thunder rolled across the sky, and the wind battered the castle until the window panes rattled. From the direction of the Forbidden Forest came the sharp crack of branches breaking. Even so, the weather couldn't dampen anyone's Quidditch fever. The stands were full of students in raincoats, clapping and shouting, their voices mostly swallowed by the storm. In the changing room, they stripped off their wet robes and pulled on the bright red team uniforms. Wood didn't pace and give one of his usual motivational speeches. Instead, he hugged each player in turn. Fred, you keep covering Katie, Angelina, and Spinnet. Robin, you stick to Harry. George, you handle logistics here. All right, time's up. Let's go. Wood drew back the curtain and led them out. The wind tore at their robes, turning them into sails. The Hufflepuff team came out from the opposite side, robes flapping in the gale. When the 2 sides met, the captains shook hands. Wood's face was grave and his jaw set, while the Hufflepuff captains smiled easily. Robin glanced at the opposing seeker, Cedric Diggory. Cedric fit his reputation. Handsome, tall, and upright, with strong brows, deep-set eyes, and a neat, noble bearing. When he smiled, he had an unforced air of refinement. In the original story, that refined, brave young man's life would be cut tragically short, killed by Voldemort's curse, and the thought made Robin's stomach tighten. Madame Hooch raised her hand. Mount your brooms. The rules are as usual. Robin wiped mud from his boot, swung his leg up, and mounted his Nimbus 2000. At the whistle, 15 brooms sliced into the rain. Red and yellow streaked across the gloomy sky. Fred, abandoning his usual antics, worked solidly as a beater, deflecting bludgers and redirecting them toward Hufflepuff chasers so Angelina, Spinnet, and Katie could score goal after goal. Robin orbited Harry, knocking bludgers away so Harry could search for the golden snitch. It was nearly impossible. The rain and gloom turned the snitch, no bigger than a walnut, into nothing but a flash of gold. Robin's wrist ached from the strain of holding his bat, and for what felt like an eternity, they scoured the air. Finally, Harry raised a hand and flashed Wood's signal. A quick C shape. He'd seen the snitch. Wood had spent the summer devising a system of hand signals for the team, and he drilled them every practice. Harry bent forward and surged. Robin came with him. The 2 of them dove under Diggory, weaving through the downpour, and stopped 3 meters from a large banner by the outer wall. Beneath it, near the flagpole, something winged flashed. The golden snitch hovered just under the banner, close to the pole. Robin glanced around. He didn't see any bludgers trailing black smoke, but he did see Cedric in his yellow robes, racing toward them. He patted Harry's shoulder, pointed to his own eyes, then drew a slashing motion in the air. Enemy aiming here. Get ready. Harry nodded and threw himself forward, pressed low to his broom, and stretched his arm. His fingertips were almost around the snitch when a brilliant flash lit the stadium. Lightning struck the flagpole directly in front of them with a sound like a cannon. The crowd screamed. In a split second, Robin dove, colliding with Harry and knocking him away out of the lightning's path. The banner and flagpole sputtered, smoked, and seemed to turn to black ash that fell with the rain into the mud. The snitch was gone. Harry spun, searching. There was no sign of it. He signaled, and Robin followed, and they circled high, squinting into the storm. Another flash lit the stands, and for a second, Robin saw a large black dog, Sirius Black in his animagus form, sitting on the top row of the Slytherin section. The creature was gaunt, ribs visible under matted fur, eyes too keen and hungry. The dog leaped from the stands and vanished into the night. Harry's lips trembled, and his face had gone pale. Robin clapped a hand on his shoulder. Once Harry steadied himself, Robin mimed two pointed ears to indicate he had seen the dog too. That confirmation steadied Harry. It meant the dog wasn't a trick of panic. Wood's voice cut through the rain. "Harry, Robin, the snitch! Behind you!" They wheeled their brooms and saw a flash of gold 100 meters ahead, and Cedric bearing down on it at top speed. Harry lunged. Robin followed. Then everything changed. The cheers, the rain, the wind. Suddenly, it was as if someone had pressed mute on the world. Water on their robes and brooms stiffened into a thin glaze of ice. Raindrops became stinging hail. Dozens of hooded figures drifted up from the lower stands, dementors, wrapped in ragged cloaks that seemed to swallow the light. A cold that bit to the bone spread out from them. Robin watched in horror as Harry kept racing forward with his eyes seeming empty. One dementor hovered only 8 meters in front of him. Harry slowed until he was a meter away. Chest caved forward and head tipped back as if some invisible thing inside him were being drawn out. The hail spun toward the dementor like it, too, was being drawn. Robin shoved his bat under his left arm, reached up into his robe with his right hand, and pulled out his ebony wand. He forced his mind through the fog of cold and fear, scrabbling for a bright, powerful memory. Something warm enough, strong enough. Dizziness and the feeling of being sucked outward hit him, but he held to the memory and drove forward. He drew his wand in a counterclockwise circle and shouted, "Expecto Patronum." 229, the scrawled puppy, is also the patron saint. A silver-white puppy, glowing like moonlight, sprang from the tip of Robin's wand. It darted between Harry and the Dementor, and the terrible sucking chill vanished at once. The Dementor turned and drifted away, and the white shape faded until it was transparent and gone. "Help! Help me!" someone screamed. Harry's knees gave out, and he fell from his broom, calling for help as he plummeted. Robin swooped down and grabbed him by the back of his collar. At that moment, a flash of light streaked across the Quidditch pitch. With a thunderous crack, a jagged bolt of lightning struck the unmanned Nimbus 2000. The broom let out a wheeze of smoke, and despite the pelting hail, orange flames licked at the wood. "My broom!" Harry cried. When Harry's feet hit the mud, he stared at the blackened fragments scattered on the ground and felt hollow with grief. Robin's face crumpled with sympathy. "Don't be so quick to blame yourself," he said, though his voice was thin. "There's something else you should see." "Harry, look up!" High above the stands, Cedric Diggory raised his right hand. Golden wings unfurled from between his fingers, and the Hufflepuff section erupted in cheers. Cedric had caught the golden snitch. The match was over. Harry trudged across the muddy grass to pick at the broom debris, head bowed. He knew he'd been waylaid by a Dementor and couldn't have pursued the snitch, and Cedric had asked the school for a rematch, but Cedric had won fairly and honorably. Even Wood admitted it. Dozens of Dementors had streamed onto the pitch, making the air bitter as an ice house. As soon as Lee Jordan declared the match finished, everyone bundled into their coats and hurried from the stands. Professor McGonagall instructed the students to warm up with ginger tea after showering, then strode toward the high platform. Dumbledore, standing above them all, looked furious. His sapphire eyes burned. According to the agreement between Hogwarts and the Ministry, Dementors had no right to enter the school. Dumbledore's anger was palpable. Back in the Gryffindor common room, 4 of them sat around a low table near the window. A black cloth bag on the table held the remains of the broom. Harry sat with his head hung, tugging at his hair. "It's my fault," he kept saying. "All my fault. I ruined everything. I let the team down. I couldn't catch the snitch, and I couldn't even save my broom." "It's not your fault," Hermione said quietly. "You can't be expected to catch the snitch every time. And there were Dementors interfering. That was horrifying. Just thinking about it gives me the chills." Professor McGonagall had been a thin line of anger. Dumbledore had looked as if he wanted to tear those Dementors apart. When they breathed that awful, gurgling way, I heard screams. It felt like my mother would have done anything to save me. I wanted to tell her to run, to get away from me. I was too weak, Harry muttered. Others weren't affected as much, were they? If I'd been stronger, I could have gone around them and caught the snitch. Harry, Robin said, Dementors don't make you weak. They take away the good things inside you and force you to relive the worst moments. The reason they affected you so much isn't because you're weak, it's because you've been through too much. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Being afraid of Dementors is nothing to be ashamed of, Ron added. After Dad went to Azkaban for a while, he shook for days when he came back. Harry lowered his eyes to the blackened pieces. Can it be fixed? He asked, fingers worrying the scorched wood. Hermione peered at the crumbs and shook her head. It's burnt to charcoal. It's not repairable. You'll have to get another one. Harry ran his hand over the ruined broom as if he might coax it to life. It's been with me over 2 years. I can't bear to lose it. Why did the Dementors have to show up right then? Wait, Robin, you chased them off. Did you cast the Patronus charm? It was instinct, Robin said. I remembered what Professor Lupin taught us and tried it. I didn't expect it to work. Your Patronus was a puppy? Harry had seen, in the chaos before he fell, a shaggy, silver-white pup. Yes, Robin admitted. Don't be fooled by how small and scruffy it looked. It was brave. It saved me. Robin had been a handful as a child. Once, when he'd sneaked out of the orphanage and gotten lost, a fierce stray dog chased him into a dead end. A scruffy gray puppy had appeared, stolen a piece of bread for him, and tugged at his trouser leg until it led him to the police station. Robin took the dog back to the orphanage, bathed it, and discovered it was actually white underneath the dirt. He named it Little Scruffy. That black dog, Harry began. I saw it too, Ron cut in. It was big and had very sharp eyes. What black dog? Hermione asked. Harry described what he'd seen. Could it have been Hagrid's? He wondered. No, Hagrid already has Fang, Ron said. Never mind, Hermione said with a dismissive click of her tongue. Baseless speculation. It's over now. Don't punish yourself. Get some rest on Sunday. Dumbledore once said that even in the darkest times, if you remember to light a lamp in your heart, happiness can be found everywhere. Hermione was right. On Monday, they got some welcome news. Professor Lupin was back teaching and declared the 2 long parchment assignments would not be collected. The class broke into cheers and drummed on the desks. Everyone, that is, except Hermione, who looked exasperated because she'd already finished hers. After class, Lupin asked the 4 of them to stay. He checked Harry for injuries, praised Robin's Patronus, and promised that next year, when he was feeling better, he would properly teach them to conjure a Patronus. The prospect of learning a powerful defense against Dementors from Lupin himself lifted their spirits, and Robin and his friends settled back into the rhythm of lessons and homework. At the end of November, more good news arrived. Ravenclaw had beaten Hufflepuff. One loss didn't knock Gryffindor out. The next match was Ravenclaw versus Slytherin. If Ravenclaw lost and Gryffindor beat Ravenclaw afterward, Gryffindor could move up to second place and face Slytherin for the Quidditch Cup. Wood, the team's relentless captain, the king of studying, trained them mercilessly. Rain or shine, bitter cold or biting wind, he'd take them up to practice. That December, Robin sweated through every session, and he found himself counting the days until Christmas. This year, Robin had signed the form to stay at Hogwarts over the holidays. He, Hermione, and Ron had agreed to stay with Harry, just in case Sirius Black tried anything. The Great Hall twinkled with colored lights again, and the long-awaited Christmas break finally arrived. The day before the holiday was set aside for a trip to Hogsmeade. 2:30, Marauder's Map, the Humpbacked Witch. Early that morning, Robin and Harry watched the others climb into carriages and leave, then turned back toward the dormitory. Robin sat at his desk, buried in books. The Connoisseur's Guide to Crystal Collectibles, Minerals and Rocks, 1001 Strange Black Stones, the energy of gemstones. He was trying to work out what the smooth, non-reflective black shard could be made of. Harry was curled up by the window and absorbed in the complete guide to broomsticks. The old shooting star was slow and jumpy. It made catching the golden snitch nearly impossible, so he was thinking it might be time for a new broom. Knock, knock. A sharp knocking came from the corridor. Robin opened the door just as Fred and George burst in like a gust of wind. Poor things, stuck indoors on such a fine day, the twins said in perfect unison. Cooped up in the dormitory reading, they finished, laughing. Harry snapped his book shut. Why didn't you two go to Hogsmeade? Before we left, we wanted to give you a bit of holiday cheer, Fred said. Early Christmas presents, George added. Fred produced something from his sleeve with a flourish. It unfolded into a square of parchment, worn at the edges but sturdy. Robin touched it. It felt soft and tough, with a faint grainy texture. What is this old bit of parchment? Harry asked. Oh, call it junk, Fred exclaimed in mock horror. This is the secret to our success. George draped an arm around Robin's shoulders. We were reluctant to give this away, even though we've had it for ages, but you two need it more. Robin watched them, puzzled. He hadn't figured everything out, but the parchment looked very familiar. I'm not sure what it is, he admitted, but it's definitely hiding something. George, show them, Fred said. George drew his wand, tapped the parchment lightly, and struck a theatrical pose. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good, he intoned. Black, webbed ink erupted from the spot his wand had touched and spread across the page, connecting in a network of lines until the entire sheet was filled. At the top, in curving green script, words appeared. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauders map. Beneath the script was a map of the castle and grounds, but unlike any map Robin had seen. Tiny black dots, no bigger than blades of grass, moved across the parchment. Above each dot, a name was written in pinprick letters. Leaning closer, Robin saw a dot labeled Albus Dumbledore pacing in a circular room. On the first floor, Madame Norris was being chased by Dobby in the kitchens. Peeves twirled in the third-floor girls' lavatory, while moaning Myrtle cowered in a stall. Severus Snape stood frozen in a dungeon corridor. Minerva McGonagall was crossing the grounds. The map even showed corridors Robin had never known about. Harry's eyes widened. This map can show everyone, George finished with a laugh, where they are and what they're doing at any given moment. Fred grinned. Amazing, right? So where did we find it? Well, it's like this, Fred began. Back in our first year, all innocent and carefree, we had a little disagreement with Filch. We set off a dung bomb in a corridor, George continued. The stench drew him out, and he hauled us into his office. You know Filch, detention threats, writing lines, being hung upside down by chains. None of that fazed us, Fred said, grinning. While we were being lectured, we noticed a filing drawer labeled confiscated items, highly dangerous. Fred glanced at George. So I set off another dung bomb. Filch was hopping mad, and Fred grabbed the drawer while all the chaos was happening, George finished. We rescued this beauty. We did everyone a service, really, Fred said. Filch is a squib. He'd never work out the parchment's secrets, even if he stared at it forever. Harry laughed, then pointed at the map. Wait, there's a passage under the Whomping Willow that leads off the map. That must go to Hogsmeade, but the willow attacks people. You can't use that. Not to worry. There's more than one way out of the school, Robin said. There are 7 secret passages in all. Filch only knows 4. The other 3, one behind the 5th-floor mirror, one through the humpbacked witch on the 4th floor, and the one under the Whomping Willow, we know about. The Whomping Willow's far too dangerous, and the 5th-floor passage is blocked, George added. So we recommend the humpbacked witch on the 4th floor. It leads straight to the basement of Honeydukes. How do you open it? Harry asked. Tap the statue with your wand and say finite incantatem, Fred said. Its big hump opens up a passage. And don't forget, after you use the map, destroy the evidence. If someone else sees it, it'll end up back in Filch's drawer. George tapped the corner of the map with his wand and announced, Mischief managed. The ink, dots, and tiny writing faded away until the parchment was blank again. All right, boys. See you in Hogsmeade, the twins said, smiling as they left. Harry rolled the map carefully and tucked it away, his eyes full of excitement. He thought of the warning he'd heard about objects that can think for themselves, but the twins had used the map for years without trouble, and it felt too useful to ignore. I'll have to double my reading tonight, Robin said with a shrug. Let's go see if it really works. They slipped through the portrait hole, hurried down to the 4th floor, and walked along a long corridor until they reached the statue of the one-eyed humpbacked witch. Robin drew his wand, tapped the witch's robe, and whispered, Finite incantum. Creak, creak. The statue's large hump slowly opened, revealing a narrow opening just big enough for one person. Robin glanced left and right to make sure the corridor was empty, then ducked into the passage. A smooth stone slide sent him tumbling for more than 10 seconds before his feet hit damp, soft ground. Harry slid after him. At the bottom, it was pitch black. Robin lifted his wand to cast a light when, without warning, a soft blue glow flared to life behind them. 231. Crazy girl, strong intuition. Did Harry cast a spell? No need. Harry stood in front of the low, narrow tunnel, craning his neck to see what lay ahead. Lift your foot. You're standing on Little Purple. A soft voice hummed from behind him. Robin turned and saw Luna wearing her radish-shaped earrings. She held a glass beaker in one hand, its bottom lined with soil where 5 or 6 tiny earthworms wriggled. In her other hand, she held a pair of tweezers, the tip still clinging with wet mud. Her slightly bulging eyes were fixed on his shoe. Robin lifted his foot and discovered a small, entirely purple earthworm stuck to the sole. He shook his foot. The worm fell and soon burrowed into the soil. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Luna came forward, squatted down, nudged the damp earth with her tweezers, and the purple worm slipped into the beaker. "I'm studying the asexual reproduction of earthworms, Robin," she smiled. "We haven't seen each other today, have we?" The message was clear. "Don't tell anyone." Robin nodded. "How did you know about this passage?" "Intuition," she said simply. Robin thought, what an explanation. No wonder Nagini had seen Luna going door to door around the village earlier. After a quick farewell, the three crouched and, careful not to make a mess of the wet mud, wriggled into the tunnel. It was like a rabbit hole, twisting, long and low, its floor rough and uneven. Harry kept stumbling on lumps of mud and stones. After about an hour, the tunnel began to slope upward. 10 minutes more brought them to the base of a dilapidated stone staircase. They slowed their breathing and climbed, one step at a time. 5 or 6 minutes later, Robin's head knocked against a loose wooden board with a sharp thud. Being small had its advantages, Harry thought, as Robin pressed his palm to the board, pried it open a fraction, and peered through. Above the trapdoor was a cellar, clean and stacked with crates and cardboard boxes. Robin drew his wand and, with a quick cleaning charm, removed the mud from both their shoes before pushing the loose board wide. He grabbed the edges, hauled himself up, and slipped into the cellar. After pulling Harry up behind him, he closed the trapdoor. The gray, loose board fit the floor so neatly that you wouldn't have known anything was beneath it. Laughter and chatter drifted down from the shop above. Harry's eyes brightened. "We're here, Hogsmeade." Suddenly there was a crisp click on the stairs and the soft creak of a door opening. Robin ducked behind a huge crate and pulled Harry in with him. "Darling, bring another box of the creamy fudge. There are too many people. We're almost sold out," a middle-aged woman's voice called from above. "All right," answered a deep male voice. Someone walked down the wooden steps. They heard shuffling and then the rummage of a man searching through crates on the far side of the cellar. Robin eased his head out from behind the crate and saw a bald, burly wizard buried in a pile of boxes, obviously straining to find something. Robin nudged Harry. Harry understood and nodded. Quietly, the two of them climbed the stairs, slipped out through the trapdoor, and entered Honeyduke's from behind the counter. The shop was crowded. The dazzling array of sweets held everyone's attention. No one seemed to notice a couple of extra faces. They pushed through to the front and examined the shelves. Shiny chestnut ice cream, square fudges rolled in crushed almonds, Dobby's every flavor beans in mischievous patterns, honey fudge redolent of mistletoe. It was easy to forget the world outside. On the door they saw a notice from the Ministry of Magic. For the safety of the villagers, Dementors would patrol the village after sunset until Sirius Black was apprehended. Beside the door was a rack of joke sweets. Hermione and Ron were bent over a jar of cockroach clusters. Hermione and Ron turned and were surprised to see them. Robin and Harry each patted Hermione and Ron on the shoulder. Hermione threw her arms around Robin in a joyful hug, while Ron's eyes widened in astonishment. "Did you use an invisibility cloak?" he demanded. "No, Dementors can see through those, can't they?" Lowering their voices, they told Ron and Hermione about the Marauders map. Ron was furious. "They didn't even tell me about the map. I'm their brother." "Harry, You must give it to Professor McGonagall, Hermione said. Sirius Black could have slipped into the castle through a secret passage. Harry bristled, but kept the map tucked away. He can't get into the castle that way, he said. There are 7 secret passages out of the school, Hermione said. Filch knows 4, which means the teachers know them too. One of the remaining 3 is collapsed and blocked, Harry went on. Another is under the Whomping Willow. The tree is violent and will attack anyone who gets near its base. The one Robin and I just used has its entrance in Honeyduke's cellar. During the day, the shop is full of customers. At night, Dementors patrol it. He can't get into Honeyduke's. Hermione and Ron seemed convinced by that, but Robin remained uneasy. He knew, somehow, that Sirius Black had used the Whomping Willow Shrieking Shack passage to get into the castle. Let's go out and explore, Ron suggested. It's snowing like mad. If you two pull up your scarves and put your hoods on, nobody will recognize you. Robin peered through the glass. Snow fell in broad, feathery flakes, piling up thick on the ground. Students bustled past bundled head to toe. Faces were hidden beneath scarves and hoods. Okay, let's go. The 4 left Honeyduke's and stepped into the blizzard. Hogsmeade's Main Street looked like a living Christmas card. Shop roofs capped in bright white snow, doors hung with holly and mistletoe wreaths, Christmas trees frosted at the tips and hung with enchanted candles. A biting wind found its way through collars and cuffs, numbing fingers and toes. Zonko's joke shop is up ahead, Hermione said, and diagonally opposite is the owl post, dozens of kinds of post owls. Let's go to the Shrieking Shack and see what the ghosts are like. Are you mad? Ron answered. I'd rather go to the 3 Broomsticks for something hot. Seamus says Madame Rosmerta has a new extra strong hot chocolate. My hands are almost frozen, Harry said, his voice trembling. It's very close, Ron said, turning away from Zonko's. Robin and the others followed more slowly. 2 minutes later, they stood at the entrance of the 3 Broomsticks. 232, the Loyalty Curse, the Secret Keeper's Betrayal. Above the pub's entrance hung 3 brooms, arranged in a triangle with their bristles touching, and a large oil lamp dangled from the apex. Inside, the place was much more spacious and brighter than the hogshead. The lower part of the walls, up to about a meter high, was paneled in warm, brownish-yellow wood. The floor was clean. Plush sofas and painted oak tables and chairs were neatly arranged. On either side of the passage from the door to the bar stood broad round oak pillars, each draped with fan-shaped red silk. Behind the bar stood the charming and graceful landlady, Madame Rosmerta. The group ordered 4 hot chocolates and some nut pastries, then took their tray to the right of the bar and chose an empty table by the fireplace. A dense Christmas tree stood on the other side of the table. It was so full that anyone standing behind it couldn't see the 4 people at the table at all. This is delicious, Ron exclaimed, his lips smudged with brown foam. Robin took a small sip. The silky hot chocolate flowed like a warm current through him, leaving him pleasantly refreshed. As the chill eased and he thought about grabbing another pastry, 4 voices rose from the other side of the tree. A small glass of violet water. 4 pints of mead. A large glass of soda water with ice and cherry syrup. A bottle of red vinegar rum. The first voice was clear and cool. The second was hoarse and breathy. The third was high and thin, with a peculiar lilt. The fourth was deep, with a hint of teasing. The 4 guessed the first 3 belonged to Professor McGonagall, Hagrid, and Professor Flitwick, but the 4th voice didn't ring any bells until Rosmerta answered them. Professor's minister, please take a seat. I'll bring the drinks over as soon as they're ready. The Minister for Magic, Cornelius Fudge, was here. My dear Rosmerta, how lovely to see you. Order something for yourself and join us. It's on me, Fudge said. Certainly, thank you very much, Minister. Footsteps drew closer to the Christmas tree, and a hand pressed down on Robin's head, pushing him under the table. Harry, who had been squatting beside him with peanuts in his hand and looking startled, had been shoved under the table as well. The 2 of them lay flattened on the floor, peering through the fir branches and the narrow 15-centimeter gap beneath the table toward the other side. Chairs scraped back. There was a collective sigh as the 4 took their seats. High heels clicked over the floor toward the table, then the clatter of bottles and glasses being set down. The owner of the heels sat down beside Fudge. It fit. McGonagall wore women's shoes. Hagrid had huge feet, and Flitwick's feet dangled when he sat. "My dear, is business still good?" Fudge asked. "If Dementors weren't searching the pub every day, business would be booming." Rosmerta bristled. For a pub, the night was the most profitable time. "I'm sorry, Minister. There's an escaped murderer, and we have to take precautions." "Sirius Black, is he in Hogsmeade?" Fudge asked. "Speaking of Black, I can't believe he joined the Dark Lord," someone murmured. "I remember him at Hogwarts. Brave, loyal, sincere, kind, and completely mad," another voice said. "If someone had told me then that he'd become a killer responsible for a dozen deaths, I would have thought them mad." Rosmerta shook her head sadly. "My dear, Black's worse than most people realize. Few know what the worst thing he ever did was." The woman in the teal shoes crossed her legs and leaned forward with interest. "Worse? Worse than causing an explosion in the street and killing a dozen muggles?" "Of course. I don't believe it." "Rosmerta, do you remember who Black's best friend was at school?" McGonagall asked softly. "Of course. They were inseparable, always together, like a double act. In their mischief, they were worse than Fred and George and gave every teacher headaches. Back then, many thought Black and James were brothers." At that, peanuts slipped from Harry's hand. Robin, quick as a flash, snatched them up. He put a finger to his lips and tapped his ear, signaling Harry to be quiet and listen. Harry took a few deep breaths and nodded. "My dear, that friendship, closer than brothers, continued after they left school," McGonagall continued. "When James and Lily married, they asked Black to be best man, and later made him Harry's godfather." "Of course, Harry doesn't know about that, or it would torment him," Rosmerta added. "Minister, is the worse than killing innocent people thing referring to that?" Rosmerta asked, suspicious. "Not at all. That was only the prelude," Fudge said. He shifted in his chair, the oak protested. For a heartbeat, he looked around as if checking for ears, and then his voice dropped to a whisper. "Back then, when Dumbledore led the fight against the Dark Lord, he learned from a capable spy that the Dark Lord knew about the prophecy concerning the child and planned to hunt down the Potters." Faint voices continued from the other side of the tree. "Dumbledore advised the Potters to hide. It's very difficult to hide from the Dark Lord's eyes, but Dumbledore proposed a brilliant plan." "What plan?" Rosmerta asked, suddenly serious. She set her glass down and leaned in. "Professor Flitwick, you tell it. You explain it best," McGonagall said. Flitwick cleared his throat and explained in his high, precise voice. "Dumbledore suggested using the Fidelius charm, an extremely complex spell. The charm conceals a secret within the soul of a living person, the Secret Keeper. As long as the Secret Keeper does not reveal it, even if the Dark Lord and his followers turned Godric's Hollow inside out, they would not find the Potters. They could be right next door and still be hidden." McGonagall took up the story. When James heard about the Fidelius charm, he suggested Sirius as the Secret Keeper. But Professor, having fought the Dark Lord's forces, had come to suspect there was a traitor among their ranks, someone who'd been feeding information to the Dark Lord. He was certain the traitor was among the few close to the Potters, Flitwick added, but James insisted on making Sirius the Secret Keeper. And then, less than a week after the Fidelius charm was cast, the Dark Lord broke into Godric's Hollow and killed. "Despicable, filthy traitor," Hagrid bellowed, his voice so loud and rough it shook the fir branches. The table went quiet at the other side of the tree. The name hung unsaid in the air, but the accusation trembled with it. Someone close had betrayed the Potters, and the betrayal had led to those terrible deaths. 233. Secrets of the Past, Regrets of the Half-Giant. Black escaped right under my nose that night. Hagrid swallowed a mouthful of mead and said with regret, "That night, I had just carried little Harry out of the ruins, blood soaking his forehead. Then I saw Black land in the yard on a flying motorcycle. I thought he'd come because he'd heard what happened and rushed to help. His face was pale, his hands were trembling. I even comforted him. I'd like to slap myself for being so foolish. Later he said he was Harry's godfather and wanted to take him and bring him up himself, but Dumbledore ordered me to find Harry and take him to Privet Drive, saying the protection would only last if Harry was raised by blood relatives. I don't know all the theory behind it, but I knew I had to do as the headmaster asked." Black argued with me for a while, then gave in and left his motorcycle behind. At the time, I thought he'd relented because of me. Later, I realized he left it because the Dark Lord had fallen and Black needed to run. Riding that bike would have made him easy to track. What would have happened if I'd handed Harry over? I'm certain he would have thrown the boy off a cliff without a second thought. When someone sells his soul to the dark, there's no humanity left in him. Qinggao stepped to his side and murmured comfortingly, "The Dark Lord fell, and Black didn't get away that night, did he?" The ministry caught him the next day. "If only it were that simple," Fudge said with a sigh. It was Peter Pettigrew, short, pudgy, always hanging off James and Black. Pettigrew cut his own throat to make it look like he'd been killed and pinned the crime on Black. When we arrived, there was a crater in the street, Muggle bodies everywhere. Black was standing on a pile of blood-stained robes, laughing. Those were Pettigrew's robes. We could only find one finger inside them. Poor child. We locked Black up in Azkaban and brought what we thought was Pettigrew's body back to his mother's home. He was awarded the Order of Merlin, first class. But what use is that? He's gone. Qinggao moved closer to the fat wizard and whispered, "Minister, everyone imprisoned in Azkaban goes mad, doesn't he?" "It's hard to say," Fudge answered. "Most do, but not all. When I inspected Azkaban last, I met Sirius. He seemed different, not raving like the others. He pressed his face to the bars and asked calmly if I had finished the newspaper I was holding, said he was bored and wanted to do the crossword. Out of pity, I gave him the paper. He betrayed that kindness. Not long after, he escaped." Robin snorted. "I'll bet that newspaper was the Daily Prophet, and it probably had a photo in it, a family picture of the Weasleys in Egypt. Sirius saw that rat on Ron's shoulder and recognized him. Pettigrew hadn't been killed at all. He'd taken the form of a rat and put himself where no one would suspect him. That's why Sirius risked everything to get out. He thought Pettigrew was still alive." "Would he be escaping to join the Dark Lord?" Rosmerta asked, voice small. "I think he might," Fudge said. "But he'd been imprisoned for over a decade. If he wanted to rejoin Voldemort, he'd need a token of allegiance, a living, powerful symbol. He'd need Harry Potter." A glass set down on the bar clinked. From across the room, a serious voice floated over. "Fudge, it's getting late. If you have ministry business to discuss with Dumbledore, you'd best leave now." Chairs scraped back. Footsteps clicked as people pushed their way out. Qinggao's heels sounded on the floor. The door swung open, and cold wind and a flurry of snow blew in. Hagrid and the others stood and filed out. Harry crawled from under the table and moved toward the door like a sleepwalker. The three others followed closely. From the bar, Robin saw Rosmerta washing glasses, unaware of their exit. Outside, the four of them pushed through the biting wind and made their way down the lane between the scribes Quill and Dervish and Banges into the snow-covered woods. Harry sat on a stone dusted with white, his face buried in his knees. Hermione and Ron exchanged worried looks. Robin watched him with sorrow in his eyes. 14 years old, Harry had finally begun something like a normal life after years of the Dursleys' abuse, only to be dragged right back into this. Abruptly, he lifted his head and cried, "Every time a Dementor gets near me, I hear my mother scream. She was begging, protecting me with her life, and Black did that to them. He was their friend, and he betrayed them. If he comes for me, I'll raise my wand and fight him to the death. Only one of us will walk away." The fierceness in Harry's gaze made the others start. Ron's upper lip trembled. He looked like he wanted to protest, but couldn't find the words. "I think you should talk to Black before you fight him," Robin said quietly. "Talk about what?" Harry clenched a fist and stared at him. "Ask if he was the informer, if he set off that explosion in the street, if he killed Pettigrew, if his escape was to find me and hand me over to Voldemort?" "Don't say the Dark Lord's name," Robin replied, matter-of-factly. Ron hugged himself and shivered. Robin's calm tone pulled the venom of hatred back from Harry's voice and restored some small measure of reason. It also reminded him of Hagrid, his anger and helplessness when he'd been accused, the tears of injustice. Those images kept tugging at Harry, leaving him torn. Yet the evidence against Sirius was heavy. The Fidelius charm would only be broken if the Secret Keeper willingly revealed the Potter's hiding place. Hagrid had seen Black coming out of the ruins. The Muggle's memories were modified only after the Ministry's investigation. Black had been silent in Azkaban for 12 years. Would an innocent man sit without crying out? A gust of wind whipped up the snow. Harry stood, shaking flakes from his robe. Come on, let's go find Hagrid and ask him why he never mentioned Sirius Black when he told me about my parents. Ask him what kind of man Black really was. Harry, you don't actually believe what Robin's suggesting, do you? The Ministry and the school wouldn't make a mistake. Ron's insistence showed he understood Robin's implication. You're wrong, Ron. The Ministry and the school have made mistakes before. Just look at what happened to Hagrid. Harry smiled grimly. It wasn't that he distrusted the Ministry and the school completely. It was that they had been wrong once, and that possibility was enough to drive him. Come on, Hermione, Ron, you two should try walking through a secret passage too. The four of them made their way back to the main street through the alley, keeping out of sight, and slipped into Honeyduke's cellar. They climbed down beneath the trapdoor, walked for an hour, and finally hauled themselves up a long, slippery stone chute. At last they emerged from the one-eyed witch's hump and found themselves back on the fourth-floor corridor of the castle. I'll take a carriage next time. Ron doubled over, palms on his knees, panting. The mud at the entrance of the passage looks disturbed. Do you think someone else, besides Fred and George, knows about this? It was 7 o'clock. They headed for the gamekeeper's hut. Before they could knock, they heard suppressed, sorrowful sobs from inside. Should we call someone? What if there's danger? Ron fretted, imagining Sirius breaking in to reclaim his motorbike and attacking Hagrid. Ron, stop scaring yourself, Hermione said, annoyed. Harry knocked loudly on the wooden door. Hagrid? It's us! Heavy footsteps thudded from inside. The door creaked open. Hagrid's eyes were swollen, and his beard glistened with tears. Harry stared. Only a few hours earlier, Hagrid had been loudly cursing Sirius. Hagrid, what's wrong? Harry began, but before he could finish, Hagrid flung his great arms around him. The pressure on Harry's ribs made him wince. Hagrid was half giant, and his hugs were not gentle. Hermione, Ron, and Harry had to pull at Hagrid's hands together to get him to let go. Hagrid swayed. The four of them shepherded him inside. Once inside, Hagrid collapsed into a chair and buried his face on the table, sobbing. Tears fell and plopped onto the low table. Hagrid, what happened? Harry asked, holding out a cup of warm water. Hagrid didn't take it. Instead, he fumbled in his pocket and produced a crumpled official letter. Harry set the cup down, smoothed the paper, and read aloud while Hermione, Ron, and Hagrid leaned in. Dear Mr. Rubus Hagrid, we are pleased to inform you that, upon investigation, you bear no responsibility for the Hippogriff's attack on a student during class. However, a complaint has been received from the pupil's father, Mr. Lucius Malfoy, which calls into question whether Buckbeak may be considered gentle and harmless. Therefore, jurisdiction over this matter has been transferred to the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. A hearing will be held on February 24th. Please bring Buckbeak to the committee's office in London at that time. Until then, please ensure Buckbeak is securely tethered and kept isolated to prevent any further incidents. Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures? Hermione said. Buckbeak's not dangerous. He'll be fine. Hagrid dabbed his eyes with his collar and choked out, You don't understand. Those greedy old gents on the committee, they're always picking on interesting creatures. They're afraid of anything they don't know. From a dim corner of the hut, there was a soft, wet, clicking sound. Harry turned toward it. A monstrous thing crawled out of a wheel-sized, chipped stone egg, a head like a lobster, a slimy mouth like a large snail, and a bulbous, tentacled body like an octopus. It emitted a pig-like shriek. Hagrid reached under the table for a small bamboo basket, tossed a few dead chickens into the corner, and the creature ravenously shredded them into a paste before swallowing. He's an interesting one, isn't he? Hagrid managed a faint smile as he looked at his pet. Harry couldn't help thinking that Hagrid's idea of interesting was never what anyone else expected. After feeding the creature, Hagrid slumped back and sobbed again. It's no use, he said between hiccups. Those old men, they only ever think about money and power. They do what Lucius Malfoy wants. If I lose, they'll put Buckbeak down. He's an animal, not a person. I can't explain to him to fly off and hide somewhere where no one will find him." "I thought about setting him free," Hagrid went on, "but then he'd be a wanted animal. I thought about asking the creature protection groups for help, but Buckbeak has a formal case against him. No one will take him." "Hagrid, don't give up," Hermione said firmly. "We can help. We can research, write a defense, and even testify. We were all there when Malfoy was injured, weren't we?" Ron poured a cup of hot tea and handed it to Hagrid. "Drink this," he said. "Mum always gives a cup of tea when someone's upset." Hagrid took the cup, wiped his face, and managed a ragged sigh. "You're right. I can't just give up. I'll fight for him. Buckbeak's counting on me." A soft whine came from under the table. Fang timidly poked his head out and rested his chin on Hagrid's knee. His worried dark eyes looked up at his master, while his hindquarters accidentally rested against Harry's shoe. "Fang, good boy," Hagrid croaked. "I'll cook you some chicken legs later, yeah? Oh, is it getting late?" Hagrid peered toward the window as if he'd seen something dreadful. "What is it?" Harry asked. "Didn't I tell you not to be out after dark? You ought to get back to the castle now. I'll walk you to the gate." Hagrid shepherded the four of them out, muttering all the way, "If you're out wandering at night again, I'll tell Professor McGonagall and make you write lines." The three of them let it go in one ear and out the other. They knew Hagrid wouldn't actually do it. The moon set and the Christmas holidays began. Because of the trouble with Sirius Black, most students went home for the break. The common rooms, corridors, and the Great Hall were empty. Instead of snowball fights, skating on the Black Lake, or wizard chess, Harry, Hermione, and Ron spent the holiday in the library. They borrowed stacks of old books and scrolls and carried them back to the Gryffindor common room. Sitting around the fire, poring over musty tomes, they researched past cases of creatures attacking people and what had happened afterward. The stories they found were grim. Monsters who harmed humans and escaped punishment tended to have powerful masters or such dangerous strength that no wizard dared to capture them. None of the records offered an easy path for Buckbeak. They were so busy that at dinner they hardly had the energy to admire the Great Hall's Christmas decorations. On Christmas morning, Robin was awakened by a pillow to the face. "Hey, presents!" At the foot of the bed. Ron had thrown the pillow at Harry and was already grinning. Robin yawned, rolled from pillow to foot of the bed, retrieved his long sock, and peered inside to see what he'd been given. The first item was a bulging paper package with no sender's name. Inside was a bright red sweater with a lion stitched on the front, unmistakably knitted by Mrs. Weasley. The second was an elegant square box tied with a ribbon. Inside lay cream cakes and assorted animal-shaped chocolates, sleek little snakes, smirking white foxes, ferocious black dragons, and bewildered spiders. No card accompanied the box, but Robin knew the cakes and chocolates were handmade by Nagini. The third gift was a rectangular black box. When he opened it, there was a small iron hammer, heavy to the touch. There was no name on the box and no card. "Robin, lend me your hammer. I want to crack the hazelnuts Charlie sent, and I can't open them with my fingers." "Here, take it," Robin said. Ron grabbed the hammer and took it back to his bed, fidgeting with it. "Robin, your hammer looks solid, but it can't even crack a hazelnut." Robin blinked. That couldn't be right. He slid off the bed, went over to Ron, snatched the hammer back, and brought it down hard on a hazelnut on the floor. His wrist went numb. The nut didn't crack. It didn't even dent. There was a moment of stunned silence. "Maybe Romanian hazelnuts are extra tough." "Heh?" Ron said, eyes dancing. Robin didn't believe him. He picked a hard candy from Ron's snack bag, set it on the floor, and slammed the hammer down. The candy remained intact, the wrapper unwrinkled. A pudding didn't even wobble when he tried it next. Frustrated, Robin spread his left hand wide, wound up, and brought the iron hammer down hard on his palm. "No, don't go smashing your own hand," Ron cried, too late. Robin's right hand tingled from the impact, but his left felt nothing, as if the hammer hadn't touched it at all. In short, a hammer that looked heavy and sturdy but couldn't break a thing. There had to be some enchantment on it. A shout from across the room cut through his puzzlement. "Firebolt!" "What? What did you say? The firebolt?" Ron's voice rose. There was a rustling sound, and hazelnuts poured like hail from Ron's paper bag onto the floor. He stepped carefully aside and walked to the single bed by the window. Robin put the hammer away and followed. On the duvet lay a gleaming broomstick. At its top, a registration number was engraved in gold by hand. The shaft was perfectly straight and glossy. The tail, a bundle of birch twigs, was smooth and well bound. Its streamlined shape was impeccable. Wow, I've always wanted a firebolt. Harry, who has that kind of money? Ron gaped, taking off his socks and scrambling onto Harry's bed, his eyes glued to the broom. Harry stroked the broom gently, his face full of wonder. There's no sender and no card, but it definitely wasn't the Dursleys. Dumbledore, he sent you the invisibility cloak anonymously before, didn't he? Ron offered. It was my dad's cloak. Dumbledore only returned it. Harry corrected. But Lupin treats you oddly favorably. Robin remembered Lupin's patched appearance and snorted. Don't be daft. A firebolt costs hundreds of galleons. He wears ragged robes every day. Does he look like someone with money? Ron laughed at his own careless guess. Suddenly, the dormitory door creaked open, and Hermione walked in wearing fluffy pajamas and clutching Crookshanks, who was baring his claws. Ron quickly scooped Scabbers from beside Harry's pillow and stuffed him into his pajama pocket. Hermione, if you bring that cat here again, I'll throw it out the window and see if cats really do have 9 lives. Ron threatened. Hermione ignored him, her eyes fixed on the broom and wide with astonishment. Harry, who sent it? No idea. No name, no card. Hermione's face tightened, and she grew very cautious. A firebolt, top of the line, 10 times the cost of Malfoy's Nimbus 2001. I wouldn't mind a ride. Ron and Harry exchanged hopeful glances. I think we should leave it alone for now, Harry said, nodding. Crookshanks, come here. Crookshanks leapt onto Robin's chest, dove toward Ron's pocket, and began pawing and biting. Scabbers squeaked from inside the pocket. Get away! Get away! Ron clutched his pocket and kicked at the cat, which hissed and arched on the foot of the bed. Thump! Crookshanks vaulted down, and Ron's foot hit the wooden trunk at the foot of Harry's bed. He dragged it into the room for the holidays to rummage for clothes. Ron's big toe swelled and reddened immediately. He yelped. The trunk toppled, sending clothes sprawling across the floor. A high, piercing whistle came from the heap of clothing. From an old sock tumbled a tiny spinning sneakoscope, whirring on the floor. Crookshanks regarded the glowing, chirping thing for a moment, then resumed hissing at Ron. Harry scooped the sneakoscope up, stuck it back inside the sock, and tied the top shut. The shrill noise stopped at once. Nasty thing, Ron growled. Hermione, if you won't control your cat, don't blame me for. I'll say what I like, Hermione snapped. Your Scabbers is the nasty one. The shopkeeper said Crookshanks has Kneasel blood. He can tell who's up to no good. She handed Robin a tin of heart-shaped fruit hard candies, scooped Crookshanks into her arms and left, muttering about lunatics. Harry, why are you staring at Scabbers? Ron asked suspiciously as Hermione went. Harry had been looking at the rat oddly, but he only shrugged. Nothing. Harry bent down to help tidy the clothes. Robin put the candy tin away and went to wash up while Ron fumbled through the trunk looking for something for his throbbing toe. This year, with fewer students staying over the holidays, the school felt quieter than usual. Still, the Great Hall was splendidly decorated. Christmas trees, wreaths, garlands, and fireworks, and a lavish feast laid out under floating candles. The staff had dressed in their holiday best. Even Filch had swapped his usual shabby brown robe for a black tailcoat. It looked far too tight and smelled faintly of mildew and cheap perfume. During the meal, Hermione spoke only to Robin, barely glancing at Ron or Harry, which left Harry baffled. After all, he hadn't kicked Crookshanks or tried to harm the cat. 236. The firebolt only heated up for a second after dinner. Hermione leaned forward, palms on the edge of the table, and glanced toward the staff table. That's odd. Where did Professor McGonagall go? She was just here. She went upstairs with Professor Flitwick, Ron said, sipping his apple juice. They were probably discussing something. Hermione stood and left the Great Hall. Ron, why did you lie? She left with Hagrid. Harry called after him, puzzled. Ron looked sheepish. Is that so? Then I must have been mistaken. How about we? Harry, she won't find Professor McGonagall up there, so she'll go back to the common room. Let's go to the dormitory, grab the firebolt, and then, well, take it for a spin around the Quidditch pitch. Harry nodded. The three of them went back to the boys' dormitory, fetched the firebolt and the broom care kit, and hurried toward the Quidditch pitch. As soon as they stepped outside the castle gates, they ran into Professor McGonagall. A firebolt, hand-engraved registration number, gleaming, sturdy ash handle, streamlined birch twigs. It's really a firebolt. For a moment, the stern professor lost her severity. Her eyes lit up with unmistakable admiration. This is marvelous. With it, Gryffindor's chances in the Quidditch Cup will improve considerably. We were just about to go try it out on the pitch, Harry said, equally excited. Go on then, be careful, she called, but they had barely started down the steps when McGonagall's voice came from behind them again. Potter, the firebolt is your Christmas present, isn't it? Yes, Professor. Who sent it? McGonagall's expression tightened. I don't know, Harry answered. You don't know? Her voice rose. The box had no sender information, and there had been no card inside. Potter, I'm afraid I shall have to take the firebolt and ask Madam Hooch and Professor Flitwick to dismantle it and check for any dark magic. If it is found to be safe, it will be returned to you. It's a firebolt, Professor. If it's dismantled and reassembled, its performance could change. Whether it has any faults cannot be determined by the naked eye. McGonagall softened a little. They will be careful and will not harm it, Potter, but you may not fly on it until we are absolutely certain it is safe. Professor, Harry protested as she reached for the broom. Give it to me, Potter. In the end, McGonagall took the firebolt. Harry clutched the care kit and watched her go, his voice small. Professor McGonagall, why? Ron sighed. She probably thinks Sirius sent it. After all, he's your godfather. He's been in Azkaban for 12 years. Where would he get money to buy a firebolt? Harry objected. Maybe he hid some before he was caught, Ron offered. Harry understood McGonagall was acting for his safety, but he couldn't help feeling let down. I hope they find nothing wrong and return it soon. But if they take it apart, who knows if the internal parts will be damaged? Come on, Ron said, changing the subject. Let's not stand in the cold. Back to the common room to warm up by the fire. They went back into the castle. On the 8th floor, they found Hermione giving the portrait a password. You despicable, stinking wizard, the portrait yelled. The same to you, madam. Cadogan snapped, grabbing the gray horse's ear and making the portrait lurch forward so the boys could slip inside. Harry, I think there's something wrong with your broom, Hermione began as soon as they entered. When the three of us went downstairs just now, we ran into Professor McGonagall, Ron cut in. She suspects the anonymous sender had bad intentions, so she's confiscated the firebolt. If Flitwick and Hooch detect no dark arts, she'll send it back. Don't be too upset, Ron added quickly. Professor McGonagall is thinking of your safety. Harry nodded, but it was a thin sort of understanding. He trudged into the dormitory, Ron close behind. Hermione fussed with Crookshanks, then went to the library to return the books they'd borrowed the previous week. Harry lingered in his bed for a day, but nothing changed. McGonagall did not send the broom back, so he realized the firebolt was not coming home anytime soon. Ron brought out wizard's chess, building blocks, a spinning top, magical cards, and anything else he could find to distract Harry. Nearly 10 days passed like that. During the holidays, Ron and Hermione spent long hours in front of the common room fire, bent over books and discussing useful cases. The day before classes resumed, the Hogwarts Express stopped again at Hogsmeade Station, and the Great Hall, corridors, and common rooms filled with noise and movement. Oliver Wood heard about the firebolt and thumped his chest, promising he would get it back. Harry trusted Wood and felt better. He even ate more than usual that evening. Just as they were finishing their meal, Professor Lupin approached. I said I would teach you the Patronus charm next term if I felt well enough, he reminded them. Do you think my complexion looks improved? Yes, very good, rosy and well, Ron said without batting an eye. Good. Thursday at 8 o'clock in the History of Magic classroom. It's big enough. All of you come. Lupin patted Harry on the shoulder and went back to the staff table. Hermione clenched her fists with eagerness, and Harry happily finished another bowl of soup. 4 long days of anticipation followed. On Thursday at 8, they gathered in the History of Magic classroom. The room was pitch black, and the curtains swayed in the draft, throwing ghostly shadows. Ron pulled out his wand and lit the lamps. After a few minutes, the heavy wooden door creaked open and Lupin entered, carrying a large crate. He set it down on the podium with a resounding thump. "What's in the box?" Harry asked. "A very good substitute for a Dementor." Lupin replied, "A boggart. It took me several days to find one in Argus Filch's filing cabinet." "Why not use the one from the wardrobe?" Ron asked, puzzled. "Because this shouldn't be common knowledge," Lupin said quietly. "If a creature that likes to scare people went missing from the common room, it would be noticed far too quickly." 237, Patron Saint, practicing like crazy. "What is a Patronus?" Hermione asked curiously. "A Patronus is a force made of hope, happiness, and the will to survive," Lupin answered. "It's the physical manifestation of everything Dementors feed on. It has no negative emotions, no pain, sorrow, or despair, so Dementors can't hurt it. It acts as a shield, protecting a witch or wizard from Dementors, and even driving them away." Harry remembered the small white dog he had seen during the match against Hufflepuff and guessed, "Professor, everyone's Patronus looks different, right?" "Yes, that's right," Lupin said. "Some people's Patronus is a stag, some a dog, some a wild boar. The outward form is closely connected to the witch or wizard's personality and experiences. It's not fixed either. A Patronus can grow, shrink, and even change its shape over time." "Professor, what does your Patronus look like?" Robin asked. Lupin smiled warmly, waved his wand, and clearly pronounced, "Expecto Patronum." A beam of silvery white light shot from his wand, and an enormous, powerful silver wolf leapt from it. The wolf ran in a wide circle around them. As Robin reached out as if to touch its tail, flashes of images, werewolves, black dogs, stags, and tiny mice racing through the Hogwarts grounds at night, flickered through his mind. When the wolf faded back into light, Lupin said, "All right, let's practice. Concentrate. Recall a particularly happy memory. Make a small, counterclockwise motion with your wrist and say, 'Expecto Patronum.' Your voice must be loud and your pronunciation clear. Now, try it without wands." "Expecto Patronum," the four of them shouted at once, swishing their hands. "Good, stronger voices. Ron, make your circle a bit smaller. Try again." "Expecto Patronum," the shout echoed around the classroom. "Excellent, now raise your wands and try." They did so. From Robin's wand burst a tiny dog, no bigger than a shoe, glowing with silvery white. From Harry's and Hermione's wands came balls of silvery mist. Ron's wand, however, showed nothing. The small dog hopped onto Robin's shoulder, panting a little white mist. Harry and Hermione chased their lights eagerly. Ron stared at his wand in frustration. Lupin put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't be discouraged. Everyone fails sometimes. You need a stronger, happier memory." "Harry," Lupin went on, after a moment, "are you ready to face the boggart? Among us, only you can make it become a Dementor." Harry drew a deep breath. "I'm ready." Lupin moved to the lectern. With a gentle flick of his wand, the desks and chairs folded and stacked neatly against the wall. Harry stepped forward to the large wooden box by the lectern. His green eyes, magnified by his glasses, were fixed on the lid. "Wands ready?" Click. Lupin unlocked the box. "Begin." He lifted the lid. A hooded figure, the boggart, slowly rose. Black, ragged hands gripped the edge of the box. The classroom lights seemed to dim. By the faint moonlight, Robin could make out the figure's dark, ribbon-like cloak flapping. A gurgling sound came from within the hood as it leaned forward and glided toward Harry. Harry's face drained of color. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. Before he could steady himself, he collapsed with a thud. "Expecto Patronum," 3 voices rang out. Ron still had no effect. Hermione's wand produced a basketball-sized ball of silvery gas that flew forward 3 meters before dissipating. Robin's wand produced a small silvery dog that darted toward the boggart but did not attack it. Lupin hurried down from the lectern and with a precise, clipped ridiculous, made the boggart change into a full moon. The full moon, deflated like a balloon, circled the classroom once and flew back into the crate. Lupin closed the lid, then pulled out a bar of chocolate frog, offering it to Harry, who was sitting on the floor, breathing hard. "Eat some. You'll feel better." Harry gnawed half the chocolate. The dizziness and shaking eased. "I'm sorry," he said, embarrassed. "I let you down." "Very few people manage a Patronus on the first try," Lupin reassured him. "You did fine." Lupin paused. "Out of curiosity, what memories did you use when you cast just now?" "My first flying lesson, soaring on a broom over the pitch," Hermione said. Harry, still unsteady as he rose, described his. A bright afternoon, curled up in the cupboard under the stairs reading, when an owl flew in and dropped my Hogwarts letter. I'd gone to Diagon Alley after Mum returned from Egypt, and she bought me a new wand, Ron said. Lupin shook his head. Not nearly enough. Try again. Robin? A feast, Robin said calmly. Not bad, Lupin murmured, smiling. He suspected Robin hadn't said the whole truth, but he was wrong. Robin had picked the memory of the New Year's Eve when the old head of house was still alive, a crowded, noisy night in the great hall when everyone had squashed in to make and eat dumplings together. That memory, warm and bustling, was pure happiness to him. Lupin clapped to draw their attention. Remember, to summon a true Patronus, you need a happy, powerful memory. Close your eyes, concentrate, search until you find the memory that makes you feel the happiest, lose yourself in it, and then say the spell, Expecto Patronum. Robin closed his eyes and let a stream of images pass. His first meeting with little Scruffy, that joyful New Year's, the mystery of a carved totem, acquiring Nagini, that first time flying high above the grounds. At last he settled on what felt most unforgettable, because happiness, he thought, is something only you can define. Have you chosen? We have, the four responded in unison. Very good. Harry, go to the side of the crate. Harry took his place, wand steadying in his hand. Begin. Lupin opened the box again. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. An even larger, fiercer Dementor surged out, hissing and lunging at Harry. Expecto Patronum. Four voices sounded. This time, Ron's wand produced a silvery puff no bigger than a ping-pong ball. Harry's wand burst forth with a trumpet-shaped beam of silvery light. Hermione's conjured a similar but slightly smaller beam. From Robin's wand sprang a small dog of white light, a little larger than the first. Lupin leaned on the lectern, clearly pleased. When the lights and animals faded, Harry steadied himself, and with an oddly defiant burst, cried, Ridiculous! The Dementor snapped into the shape of Cousin Dudley, complete with a four-tiered wedding cake that flew at his face, sending Dudley stumbling backward and making the class roar with laughter. Dudley, his fat jiggling, squeezed back into the crate. Lupin set the box on the crate and took out 4 bars of chocolate. Here, one for each of you. Which memory did you choose? They chewed and shared their answers as they ate. The year before last, after Quirrell died and Voldemort escaped, Harry said, I was in the hospital wing and Hagrid brought me an apology present, a photo album of my parents. Their smiles were so bright in the pictures. I felt really happy looking at them. I picked the day I reported for first year, Hermione said. I was on train 5972 and watched half of England and Scotland go by the window, stepping into the castle, seeing all the fantastic things, and then being sorted into Gryffindor. That was wonderful. When I was 11, I got Scabbers as a going-back-to-school present, Ron said. He laughed with me, played with me, even bit Goyle when he bullied me. He wasn't just a pet. He was a proper friend. Robin snorted. Young man, no matter how much you love him now, you'll hate him if you ever see Scabbers' true face. Try imagining cuddling up to a short, fat, bald, pointy-nosed, beady-eyed, filthy old man every night. Lupin smiled at Robin's exasperation and turned to him. What about you, Robin? Which memory did you choose? I chose the day my most respected elder died, Robin said quietly. That's not exactly a cheerful memory, Lupin said gently. No, Robin agreed. But she lived a long life. She didn't suffer from any major illness. She died in her sleep without pain. In my village, we call that a joyful funeral. I'm sad she's gone, but I'm happy for her. I think she's doing very well somewhere else. Lupin nodded, understanding spreading over his face. No wonder you got your Patronus on the first try. You think about things more deeply than most people. What do you mean? Ron asked, puzzled. People usually describe drinking orange juice by how sweet or smooth it is, Lupin explained. Robin would think about how the orange tree was grown, how the fruit was cared for, the process of juicing. He would feel everything that led to that glass of juice. The same moment contains more layers for him, more emotional strength. That makes the memory richer. That's just annoying, Ron muttered. He produced a Patronus during the match, and all I managed was a puff like steam from a teapot. Don't be disheartened, Lupin said. Compared to your classmates, you're already doing well. When I started, it took me a month of practice to get a tiny wisp of white smoke from my wand. You're farther along than I was at your age." Harry couldn't stop himself. He finished his chocolate in a hurry and looked at Lupin with hopeful eyes. "Professor, can we try again? I've thought of an even stronger memory." Lupin shook his head. "I'm afraid not. Casting the Patronus is very draining. I don't want Madame Pomfrey pulling me up for overworking you." "All right," Lupin said. "That's it for today. From now on, every Thursday evening you all come to the History of Magic classroom to wait for me, provided there's no Quidditch practice and I'm fit enough." "Okay," they chorused. They left the classroom and headed down to the 8th floor. Harry and Ron suggested finding an empty room to practice in private, but Hermione and Robin put a firm stop to that. Advanced spell work was exhausting. If they tried to force the Patronus themselves, they might collapse instead of mastering it. Under their combined objections, Harry and Ron abandoned the idea and counted down the days to Thursday. On Saturday evening, Wood knocked on their dormitory door with news, both good and bad. The good news: Slytherin had beaten Ravenclaw in January. If Gryffindor beat Ravenclaw in February, they'd move up to second place, and if they then beat Slytherin in April, they could win the Quidditch Cup. The bad news: Wood had bungled the effort to get Harry's firebolt back. Professor McGonagall had given him a dressing down, accusing him of caring more about the trophy than about his players' lives, of thinking only about the golden snitch and not whether a seeker might fall off his broom. In the end, she suggested buying a Nimbus 2001. "Never," Wood said. "Malfoy had a Nimbus 2001 in second year. I'm not buying anything he thinks is good. I'll wait for Professor McGonagall to give the firebolt back." Harry clenched his fists. They waited from January to February, and the firebolt still hadn't been returned. He kept asking McGonagall after Transfiguration, but the training schedule and schoolwork were packed. It didn't kill their enthusiasm for Patronus practice, though. Except for Robin, the others were struggling. After several sessions, Ron could only manage a faint beam of light. Harry and Hermione could summon a blurry, silvery shape, but not a clear animal, just a misty shadow. Robin's Patronus, by contrast, had grown from something the size of a small shoe to as big as a wash basin. It wagged its tail and nudged people's hands, interacting with them. After the 4th practice, they sat on the steps behind the stands to rest. Robin chewed on a hamburger, Hermione sucked a toffee, Ron shuffled through chocolate frog cards, and Harry buried his face in his knees, miserable and self-reproaching. "Harry," Lupin said softly, "for a 3rd year, being able to produce a blurry Patronus is already an achievement. I know you hoped for something as solid as Robin's, but you must measure yourself against your own progress. I've seen how far you've come in a month." "I just thought I could get a clear one," Harry muttered. "The beam of light you and Hermione conjure already has shielding power," Lupin said. "If Dementors show up at Saturday's match, you'll be able to hold them off long enough for someone to get to the stands." "Can I drive them away, make them disappear?" Harry asked. "Robin might be able to drive off 1 to 3 Dementors," Lupin replied, "but banishing a whole group takes a very powerful wizard with exceptional confidence. I think, in this castle, Dumbledore is the only one who could do that." "I hear Gryffindor plays Ravenclaw on Saturday," Lupin added. "Good luck catching the snitch." Harry's eyes dropped again at that. He still didn't have his firebolt, and the borrowed Nimbus 2000 just didn't feel right under him. "Professor," Robin asked suddenly, curious, "what do Dementors look like under their hoods?" Lupin's face darkened. "I don't know." "What do you mean, you don't know?" Hermione pressed. "Anyone who's seen a Dementor unhooded becomes very ill and can't describe it," Lupin said. "When a Dementor takes its hood off, it's about to use its final, most vicious weapon." "What weapon?" Hermione asked. 239, poor Peter, framed a cat, the Dementor's kiss. Rumor has it that when a Dementor does this, it pulls back its hood, presses its chin to the victim's mouth, and violently sucks out their soul. The person is left a mindless, memoryless husk. This is what's waiting for Sirius Black. The Ministry has issued an order. Once he is found, the Dementor's kiss will be carried out immediately. He deserves it. Lupin's voice grew hotter with each word. He slammed his fist down on the stone steps. Robin scowled inwardly. No, Sirius is innocent. They should give the Dementor's kiss to Peter and let him live forever as a rat. Finally, Lupin said, "All right, that's enough for today. You can go." He stood, locked the crate, and the four of them put away their wands and left the classroom. On the fifth-floor landing, they ran into Professor McGonagall coming down the stairs, hair in a tight bun, wearing an indigo dressing gown. She had a firebolt tucked under her arm. "Professor," Harry called. "Potter, you have a very generous and well-off friend," she said crisply. Flitwick and Hooch both checked it over and found no faults. "I went to the common room looking for you, and Siamis said you had gone out. Here, take it." Harry took the broom with trembling hands, stroking the ash shaft as if it were a living thing. It was smooth and slick, every curve elegant, and the twigs bound crisply, exactly as fine as 2 months ago. "Potter, you haven't much time. Take it down to the pitch tomorrow and get a feel for it. Saturday's match is important. You and your teammates must not lose to Ravenclaw." Harry's face lit up. "I will, Professor." The four of them climbed onto the 8th floor. As they turned into the corridor lined with portraits, they found Neville pleading with Sir Cadogan. "I wrote the password down, but I can't find my notebook." Neville was sniffling. "Little liar, what a convincing tale," Cadogan bellowed, then brightened at the sight of the approaching group. "Perfect timing, brave knights. Seize this little liar, bind him and lock him up. No food for 10 days. Neville protested. "On Monday, I asked him for all the passwords for this week. They change so often, my brain can't remember them all. But now I can't find the notebook." Ron, grinning, teased, "Why don't you write them on your arm with waterproof ink? It's not like you can lose your arm, can you?" Tears ran down Neville's round face. Robin walked up to the portrait and called, "Oddment, tweak." Squeak, squeak. Cadogan grudgingly shifted aside, revealing the hole. Neville squeezed through, still muttering about the little liar. Inside the common room, Seamus, sitting facing the portrait hole, caught sight of the firebolt sparkling in Harry's hands and made an involuntary noise, knocking the strip of parchment from his face. The firebolt. Reaction was instantaneous. Everyone set down whatever they were holding and leaned forward over the armchairs, faces turned to the portrait hole. Surprise, envy, awe, disbelief, all flashed across their expressions. Lee Jordan led the charge, and soon the whole room surrounded Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Robin, lavishing praise on the broom. "Gorgeous, like a poster," someone said. "Quite expensive, I hear it costs more than a house." "Every twig is perfect, beautiful. The Comet 206 isn't in the same league. Gryffindor will absolutely win the match." "Can I touch it?" "Yes, but be careful." Hands stroked the shaft, fingers smoothed the twigs, everyone inspected it in turn. After about 15 minutes, the firebolt came back to Harry. It had no damage, only the smudges left by many eager hands. I'll get it! I know where your broom care kit is." Ron bolted for the boys' dormitory. Then the room erupted. Meow! Crookshanks vaulted over heads and crashed through the portrait hole. Hermione reached out, but the cat swept past her and hurled himself into Robin's arms. "I feed him and take care of him, yet he prefers you." Hermione feigned indignant sorrow. The crowd was too excited by the firebolt to notice how hard Crookshanks had kicked. Otherwise, several glares might have followed. Crookshanks stiffened, neck jerking as if he were struggling to breathe. Hermione's worry showed. Robin rubbed his back. After a moment, the cat stopped retching and lay limply, chin on Robin's forearm, eyes mournful and a little plaintive. "We should take him to Madame Pomfrey," Hermione said anxiously. "But she's not a vet." "She can at least see him," someone pointed out. "Madame Norris had her fur sorted out by Pomfrey, didn't she?" "Okay, I'll go with you to the hospital wing," Hermione said. Before they could move, a high, strangled scream burst from behind the boys' dormitory door. The common room went instantly silent. Thump, thump. There was the sound of someone running desperately down the stairs inside. With a bang, the door was pushed open and Ron stormed out, dragging a bedsheet. He forced his way to Hermione and Robin, unfurled the sheet, and pointed at a still wet, dark stain. "Scabbers, look, Scabbers is dead," he shouted. "Hermione, guess what I found under the bed?" "No, I don't want to guess," Hermione whispered, covering Crookshank's face with her hand. Ron dug in his pocket and produced a small tuft of ginger-colored hair. "Hermione, your cat ate my Scabbers. You never took seriously how Crookshanks treated Scabbers as prey, and you didn't keep him from running about." A murmur went through the room. whispers that made Hermione's face harden. Dumbledore said if someone isn't proved guilty, they must be treated as innocent, she retorted. Maybe that hair's from Christmas, someone suggested. Ever since Crookshanks stepped on your head at the magical menagerie, you've looked at him funny. Crookshanks pulled a face, then coughed and spat a sticky gray hairball onto the floor. Hermione's expression crumpled, tears threatening. The cat licked his lips and rested his chin against Robin's arm, seeming more comfortable now. Scabbers, my Scabbers is just a tuft of fur now, Ron said, voice breaking. Harry stood beside him, speaking comfortingly in low tones. Robin cut in, raising a hand. I don't believe Crookshanks ate Scabbers. Ron was furious. Robin, you're totally biased toward her. Blood, cat hair, and gray hairballs. The evidence is right in front of us, Robin shot back. Fine. If you won't do anything, I will. I'll make it pay for Scabbers' life. With that, Ron snatched the crystal ball from Lavender's hands and flung it at Crookshanks. Robin's eyes went wide. Was he really going to do that? He grabbed Hermione's arm and dragged her back a few steps to avoid the throw. Thump! The crystal ball hit the floor, rolled with a squeak, and finally came to rest beside a pair of pale, light brown wool boots. A pale, slender hand picked it up. Weasley, your way of saying thanks is unique, Luna said, staring at the globe. Is this your rat? She asked. In her left hand, she held a small iron cage. Inside, Scabbers, thin, naked-skinned and squeaking, scrabbled around. Ron surged forward, took the cage, and cried, Scabbers, I thought... A flash of white light announced Colin Creevey, camera in hand. Hi, Harry, he blurted, then froze as he saw the firebolt in Harry's grip. Harry, can I take a picture with it? And could you sign it afterward? Harry ignored him and turned to Luna. Luna, why was Scabbers with you? It ate my little purple thing in the flower bed, she said calmly. Colin said it looked like a Weasley pet, so he came with me. Ron opened the cage, ignoring Scabbers' frantic wriggling, and kissed the little bald spot on the rat's head. Ugh, he was a stubborn little thing. Parvati, flustered, forced her way through the crowd toward Hermione. I'm so sorry, she said. I forgot to put the plush back in the cabinet. When I remembered, the doll was soaking wet and your cat was retching. I meant to take it to the nurse, but then... At that moment, Crookshanks pushed off from Robin's arms, sprang to the floor, and stretched. With a wet, protesting sound, it expelled a large, sticky gray hairball. Satisfied, it flicked its tail and rubbed itself against Robin's and Hermione's calves. The truth was out. Scabbers' disappearance had nothing to do with Crookshanks. Ron, apologize, Hermione snapped, snatching Crookshanks into her arms. Ron's gaze dropped. He dug in his heels. I told the truth. Your cat tried to eat Scabbers. Why should I apologize? Hermione scoffed, pushed back through the crowd, and stalked off toward the girls' dormitory. I am not wrong. Ron, clutching Scabbers in the blood-stained bedsheet, dashed back to the boys' dormitory. Luna handed the crystal ball back to Lavender and stepped through the portrait. Robin waved his wand, muttered a quick cleaning charm over the common room floor, and left with Harry. Saturday was bright and breezy, perfect for a game. Robin and the others carried their broomsticks toward the Quidditch pitch. Harry chattered about test flying the firebolt the day before, about how light as a thought it seemed, how the broom responded as if it could feel his intentions. It's like it became part of me, he said. Turn, dive, speed up, just thinking about it, and it does what I mean. 100 meters from the pitch, they met the Ravenclaw team. Their captain, Roger Davies, was a well-known athlete, tall, solid, with a handsome, confident face. Wood greeted him warmly and spoke quietly as they shook hands. Beside Davies stood a strikingly beautiful girl, glossy black hair, a small rounded nose, and eyes like a calm, shimmering pool, gentle and clear. It could only be Cho Chang. She caught Robin's glance and gave a small, polite smile. The smile was so quiet and refined it seemed to make everything else on the field pale. After quick pleasantries, Wood signaled for everyone to move on. Lad, what's the matter with you just standing there? Fred stepped on Harry's heel. No need. His soul's been stolen by a beauty, George teased. Robin craned his neck back at Harry. He was flushed, breathing fast, eyes wide with a strange mix of panic and daze. Don't let her distract you so much you forget to get the snitch, Fred warned. We can't lose points because our seeker is daydreaming. Don't be ridiculous, Harry muttered, embarrassed, and hurried to catch up. They slipped into the Gryffindor changing room, pulled on their scarlet robes, and Wood clapped his hands. We cannot afford to lose this match. Play like Gryffindors. Harry, fly like you did yesterday, someone added. But don't underestimate them. Their Seeker Cho Chang is very good. The name made Harry blush again. All right, time to go to the pitch. Robin, you stay here and handle the kit. Got it, Robin replied. Robin set his stool by the curtain and lifted it to peer out over the whole pitch with his binoculars. The stands were packed, the crowd roaring with excitement. Hermione and Ron sat far apart, Hermione still fuming about Ron's refusal to apologize. Madam Hooch stood at the center with Wood and Davies. After a brief handshake and a reminder of the rules, she blew her silver whistle. Whoosh! 15 broomsticks shot up into the sky. Harry was the fastest to reach height. The thrilling Quidditch match begins, the commentator exclaimed. It's been reported that Gryffindor has secured a top-tier international broom, the Firebolt, with a streamlined design, an ash shaft polished to diamond-like shine, and hand-selected birch. Jordan, you're a commentator, not a salesperson. Professor McGonagall snapped. Sorry, Professor, just giving a little background. Also, the Firebolt has its latest braking system. Jordan, all right, currently, Katie is pursuing the quaffle. Oh, here comes a bludger. Fantastic. It was hit away by one of the beaters. Fred or George, they're hard to tell apart. Oh my goodness. Katie's grabbed the quaffle. She weaves past the Ravenclaw chasers like a snake through the keeper. Goal. 10 points for Gryffindor. Now Angelina has it. She's pulling away, faking left, throwing the keeper off. Another goal for Gryffindor. The match was underway, the crowd cheering, and Harry felt his heart thump as he climbed higher, searching the sky with eager, determined eyes.